181. Canary cookies. Agnes watched warily as Vic held out those gaudily packaged snacks that gave off an ominous feel. She pressed her small body tight against the door, wishing she could disappear. She wasn't some naive kid who could be fooled by candy. Just that afternoon, she'd seen this fool try a prank on Senior Wednesday with something similar. The prank had backfired spectacularly. He'd been the one who suffered, wandering the academy for half an hour with an absurdly swollen tongue, looking like a stray dog. Agnes had secretly taken a dozen high-definition close-ups of that ridiculous scene and saved them in an encrypted album she callously labeled Scumbag's Dark History, planning to enjoy them later. She pursed her pale lips and stayed silent, her large, watery eyes begging Wednesday, the only lifeline she could think of. But Wednesday's cool reply shattered any hope. "I have no interest in participating in pranks during prank day," she said. That was it. Senior Wednesday had no intention of intervening. As Agnes's internal alarms blared and she considered whether she could just turn invisible and bolt, pop! One of the frog-printed snack boxes exploded on its own. A brown, sticky chocolate frog shot out in an arc and splattered perfectly across Agnes's face. Eek! No matter how much of a yandere persona she cultivated, Agnes was still 13. Having a cold, slimy, trembling chocolate toad smear across her face terrified her. She let out a sharp scream and clawed at her cheeks. Vic had been waiting for that exact reaction. A mischievous gleam lit his eyes. With lightning speed, he grabbed a seemingly ordinary cookie printed with a little bird and in one smooth motion shoved it into Agnes's open mouth. Mmph! Agnes made a strangled sound and chewed out of instinct. The cookie melted, tasting oddly of feathers and saccharin, and she swallowed. It was too late. Her face went ashen. Her fingers clawed at her throat, trying to force it back out, but a strange warmth surged from her stomach through her limbs. Crack, crackle. Soft, unnatural noises came from within her, like bones settling into new places. Agnes watched in horror as soft, glowing golden feathers began to sprout from her pores, emerging fast. Fluffy, warm feathers covered her arms, cheeks, neck, even peeking out from under her skirt. In seconds, Agnes DeMille, Wednesday's #1 yandere fan, had transformed into a round, wide-eyed giant canary, trembling with terror and disbelief. Chirp! 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 She flapped wildly, producing clear, desperate bird calls, unable to form human words. Heh! Vic chuckled, the low, scheming laugh of a pure prankster. He leisurely pulled out his phone, aimed it at the panicked, oversized canary, and began taking photos from multiple angles. Close-ups, wide shots. Exclusive blackmail material on the yandere loli secured. Chirp! He mocked, even doing an awful bird impression. On Wednesday's usually impassive face, one eyebrow rose almost imperceptibly. A flicker of genuine, almost astonished interest flashed in her dark eyes. Truly, an unexpected effect, she murmured, her tone carrying the faintest trace of appreciation. Oh my goodness. Enid covered her mouth, azure eyes wide, unsure whether to be horrified or find the fluffy spectacle oddly cute. The effect of the canary cookie wasn't permanent. After about a minute, the golden feathers began falling away, and Agnes reverted to human form, collapsing to the floor. Her uniform was askew, her cheeks blazing, panting hard. She looked dazed and mortified, a strange feathered aftertaste still lingering in her mouth. Chirp! A tiny, uncontrollable chirp slipped out of her throat. Agnes slapped a hand over her mouth, her face exploding into a crimson color. Vic froze for a beat, then erupted into uproarious laughter, tears almost streaming down his face as he shoved the phone closer. Ha! Lingering effects. Buy one, get one free. Totally worth it, he cackled. Agnes shot daggers at him. If looks could kill, Vic would have been shredded. She tried to get up, but her legs were weak. 2 failed attempts left her more disheveled. Rage, shame, and helplessness welled up, finally erupting into a louder, more desperate chirp! It took her a moment to compose herself. Victor Black, she said, voice raw. Whether from fright or fury, it was hard to tell. There was a sob under the words, but mostly a grinding, furious anger. You bastard! How dare you? What about me? Vic waved the phone. The screen showed the whole clip of Agnes turning into a golden fluff ball and panicking. He wore a plainly malicious, triumphant smile. Happy prank day, Junior Agnes. Like your little return gift? Memorable enough? Delete it. Now, delete it. Agnes lunged to snatch the phone. Vic easily sidestepped and held it just out of reach. Don't even think about it. This is UR-grade blackmail material. If you ever cause trouble again, I'll pin this on the Nevermore campus forum for a week. Title, shocking, the real form of the new Wednesday assistant, a chirping monster. You. Agnes trembled with fury, but dared not risk another rash move. She could only glare murderously at Vic. Enough. Wednesday's voice cut through the chaos like a knife, final and flat. Her dark eyes swept over Vic's triumphant face, then rested on Agnes, who still looked humiliated and furious. This farce ends now. Agnes, you may leave. Remember to report at the usual time tomorrow. Agnes bit her lip so hard it almost bled. She shot Vic one last vengeful look that screamed, "This isn't over." Then she bowed stiffly to Wednesday. "Yes, Senior Wednesday. See you tomorrow." This time she fled the dorm without hesitation, the door slamming so loudly it announced the storm raging inside her. "Ha ha ha!" Vic finally lost it, clutching his stomach as he laughed until his sides hurt. "I'm dying! Did you see her? Chirp, chirp, chirp! Ha! Enid, did you record it? Want me to send you a copy?" Enid sighed, part exasperated, part amused. "Vic, you really are too mean." 182. Match Preview. "Where did you get all this stuff?" Enid asked, eyes fixed on the colorful boxes in Vic's hands. He had a half-chocolate frog leg still twitching in his mouth. She reached over, snapped it off, and popped it into her own mouth. This is so good." Her face lit up as the rich chocolate, with a minty coolness, melted on her tongue. The frog leg even had a surprising crunch. "Right?" Vic raised an eyebrow smugly, and as if performing a trick, pulled out a few more boxes and handed them to Enid and to Wednesday, who had been watching quietly from the side. "I've got plenty in stock. Your boyfriend's connections are incredible." He puffed out his chest and began to brag. "These are all authentic snacks from the wizarding world. I know a pair of twins who study at a magic school over there called, Hogwarts. I had them buy these for me." "Hogwarts?" Wednesday repeated softly, fingertips unconsciously tracing the embossed pattern on the chocolate frog box. A faint, elusive expression flickered in her dark eyes. "Yeah. I heard kids with magical talent get an acceptance letter when they're 11, delivered right to their door by an owl." Vic tried to remember the details Fred and George had boasted to him and animatedly filled in the gaps. "Speaking of which, Wednesday, you're so special. You must have magical talent, right? Didn't you get one when you were 11? He looked at her with curiosity. With Wednesday's natural aura, someone who should be brewing potions in a castle or cursing enemies, it seemed absurd that a magic school would have overlooked her. Wednesday met his gaze calmly, voice flat. "No." She paused as if recalling something trivial. "The only thing I vaguely remember from when I was 11 is a flock of round-faced Scottish fat chickens trying to break into the Addams Manor." "And then," both Vic and Enid leaned in, "and then," Wednesday said in the same flat tone, "our family had chicken soup for a month." "Vic," Enid burst out laughing. "Pfft, that's so Addams." Vic looked stunned for a beat before switching back into full boyfriend fanboy mode, waving a fist indignantly. "I see. Then Hogwarts must have no taste. Their standards are terrible. To think they couldn't even recognize a one-in-a-million magical genius like you, Wednesday. They're missing out." His unashamed favoritism made Enid giggle. Wednesday was used to Vic's brazenly protective streak. She only raised one corner of her mouth slightly and looked down at the chocolate frog in her hand. She unwrapped it gingerly, and the chocolate frog immediately let out a croak, leaped from the box, and traced an arc through the air. Quick as a spider, Wednesday's pale fingers caught the escaping candy mid-flight. There's a card inside, too." After feeding the chocolate frog to Vic, Wednesday pulled the trading card from the box. Her eyes fell on the portrait of an old man in elegant wizarding robes, heterochromatic eyes holding depths of wisdom and ambition. A line of small gold-stamped text at the bottom read, "Gellert Grindelwald, famous dark wizard, the first Dark Lord, revolutionary, once prophesied and dedicated to establishing a new world order ruled by wizards." "Oh," she murmured, "I've seen this old man at the inn." Vic leaned in, tilting his head to study the gloomy figure on the card. "He came to the inn on vacation once, holding hands with a white-bearded old man. They seemed really close, must have been best buds when they were young." He rubbed his chin, recalling the glimpse he'd caught while helping at the elf inn front desk. "They were kind of poor, though, They only booked one room, and it was a double bed. So frugal. Two old men, holding hands, a double bed. Enid's thoughts went straight to the gutter. Her blue eyes widened, sparkling with excitement. No way. Could it really be that scandalous? She glanced at Grindelwald's nationality on the card, nodded as if something clicked, and added, British? Oh, then of course, that's just how they are. Vic saw Enid's satisfied expression and felt pleased. His gossip had landed perfectly. He glanced at Wednesday and noticed she still held the Grindelwald card. Her gaze lingered on the words, First Dark Lord and Revolutionary, as if recognizing a kindred spirit. Seeing both his girlfriends suddenly intrigued by this unfamiliar place called Hogwarts, Vic decided to drop another bombshell. He leaned in conspiratorially, lowering his voice and glancing around like a thief. Although the dorm contained only the three of them and a group of invisible figures on standby. I'll tell you a secret, but don't tell anyone. He lowered his voice even more, savoring the tension. I overheard my cousin aunt on the phone with the board of directors earlier. He paused to make sure he had their full attention, then continued. Next semester, Nevermore might be going to that Hogwarts to participate in some incredibly awesome tournament. I think it's called the Triwizard Tournament, he finished, triumphant. The Triwizard Tournament? Enid echoed, eyes sparkling. That sounds so cool. Is it like those TV shows with huge magical events, tons of competitors, and a massive trophy for the winner? She was already picturing herself as a dragon-slaying hero. Exactly, Vic nodded eagerly, proud of his scoop. He embellished even though he mostly knew the name. I heard it's super dangerous, but the rewards are insane. He grew more excited as he spoke, picturing himself on a podium. And past champions were legends. Every one of them became a big shot. He glanced at Wednesday and said in a deliberately tempting tone, Think about it. If you entered Wednesday with your skills, you'd win for sure. Forget Dark Lord cards. Maybe they'd even make a special commemorative chocolate frog just for you. He imagined a card for Wednesday with titles like Night Queen of Nevermore or an existence that eclipses the Dark Lord, and basked in the shared glory. As expected, the words danger and challenge had captured Wednesday's attention. She looked up and a dark spark seemed to ignite deep in her black eyes. The Triwizard Tournament, she repeated softly. Her voice betrayed no emotion, but anyone who knew her could feel the currents thrumming beneath the calm. Danger, challenge, exactly her sort of thing. Nevermore was interesting enough, but sometimes life needed more stimulating spice. 183. Venom lays pups. All right, that's it for next semester. Let's not talk about it anymore and get some rest. Vic gave a huge yawn, his exhaustion obvious. The intense concentration during prank day, plus the mental sparring with Agnes, had worn him out more than 3 straight days working the peak season at the hostel with Sister Mavis. All he wanted was to hold his 2 soft, fragrant girlfriends, crawl into that oversized bed, and sleep until dawn. If he could get 2 sweet goodnight kisses beforehand for recharge, that would be perfect. Grinning, he moved in, aiming for Enid first and puckering his lips in an exaggerated kiss. Enid, goodnight kiss. Enid's deep blue eyes curved into crescents, and she flushed shyly, but she still leaned in and gave him a crisp smack on the cheek. Good night, Vic. 1 down. Vic turned to the main event of the night, Wednesday. He put on an even more pitiful look and dragged his voice in a mock whiny tone. Wednesday, my queen, you see how hard I worked today? I almost died of chocolate poisoning. Don't I deserve a He puckered and leaned toward Wednesday's pale cheek. Just as his lips were about to touch, squish! A cold, slimy, asphalt-textured black mass erupted from Vic's neck and shoulder. Venom's tooth-filled maw and huge white eyes formed in an instant, separating Vic and Wednesday. Ow! Vic jumped back like he'd been electrocuted and nearly rolled off the bed. Venom! What the hell? He barked, clutching his chest. Vic, I can't take it anymore. Venom's rasp carried a weary, resentful edge. I'm quitting. You deal with those 2 ungrateful brats. Vic stared, utterly baffled, blinking as if he'd heard an alien language. Huh? What are you talking about? Venom, did you take the wrong, are we not done with prank day surprises yet? I gave birth, Venom said it flatly, as if commenting on the weather. Eh? Vic blinked. His mental CPU seemed to stutter. Venom, are you speaking human? I didn't catch that. He glanced at Wednesday and Enid for help. The girls shook their heads in unison, confusion mirrored in their eyes. Gave birth? You're yours? Vic pointed at himself, trying to process the absurd logic. You gave birth? What does that have to do with me? Ow, wait, I get it. He slapped his thigh with a self-satisfied grin, as if he'd solved a puzzle. Venom, this prank is lame. No commitment. You should at least have some slimy, bouncy little slimes and pretend they're your kids. Who'd believe it with just a line? Venom didn't answer. It opened its massive mouth, and without warning, "Bah! Bah!" Two small clumps of symbiote matter, brighter and somehow bouncier looking than Venom's main body, were spat into Vic's open palm. One was purplish-black with a dark sheen. The other was bright yellow, like a blob of mango jelly. Vic stared, speechless. For 3 seconds, everything froze. Then Vic's eyes went wide, his mouth forming a perfect O. Holy crap, Venom, you're for real? He nearly flung the two trembling blobs away, then forced himself to hold on. His mind was a mess. What did you do to me? No, what did I do to you? That's not right. We're innocent, pure brotherhood, comradeship, the relationship between a charming, powerful host and his roommate. He babbled incoherently, looking frantically between Wednesday and Enid, as if searching for testimony. Wah, Wednesday, Enid, you have to believe me. Venom and I are totally innocent. Whiter than the cookies little Enid bakes. Whiter than your little face, Wednesday. He tried to reach for the gentler Enid for comfort, but the two squirming evidence in his hands made him stiff. I don't know what's happening either. I swear I only have the purest friendship with Venom. He's just a foul-mouthed, soft-hearted, big-eating brother. How could I let him spawn? This isn't scientific or magical. Vic was practically hysterical, convinced his reputation had been ruined. This was worse than being set up by Agnes. This was a matter of principle. Wednesday watched him quietly, her pitch-black eyes flicking to the two bright symbiote offspring in his palms. Then she glanced at Vic's tearful face, and finally at Venom's stubborn, done-with-this expression. Her face was unreadable. Tilting her head, she asked in her characteristic cold, calm tone, So, is this the spawn you mentioned before? Venom's massive white eyes flicked to Wednesday, and it made a low, ambiguous gurgle, an admission. Vic's brain crashed again. What? When did you? Why didn't I remember? Venom cut him off with a resentful rasp, glaring at Vic with enormous white eyes. It's all Vic's fault. 184. Howling and Nightmare. If he hadn't spent all his time with you two lately, neglecting me, his original partner, I wouldn't have felt so empty, lonely, and cold. I wouldn't have impulsively decided to give birth to two offspring just to have someone to play with. Venom's voice rose, full of the righteous grief of someone who'd trusted and been betrayed. I never expected this, never expected it. These two little rascals are simply defying the heavens. They just came out, their forms aren't even stable, and they dare to fight me for territory. Forget about that damn demonic energy taking up space. Then they have the nerve to join the fun? Get lost. I don't want them. Vic, you're at least 80% responsible for this. It was all forced by your emotional neglect. Vic was flattened by the barrage of accusations. He stammered, I, for a long time, and couldn't get a full sentence out. He felt more wronged than Dewey. Snow in June couldn't describe how cold and stunned he felt. Just then, Enid's azure eyes lit up as she looked at the bright yellow symbiote sitting in Vic's palm. It looked like it had its own sunlight halo. She touched its springy surface carefully with a fingertip. Hey, I remember you. I know you. This color. You're called Howl, right? The yellow symbiote shivered slightly and answered in a cheerful, lively girl's voice, like an old friend greeting her. I'm glad you still remember me, Enid. You still smell so sweet and vibrant. Before anyone could react, Howl, like liquid sunshine, slid into Enid's fingertip and spread up her arm. Within seconds, a small yellow head condensed on Enid's shoulder, nuzzling against her cheek. Enid giggled delightedly. Wednesday's dark gaze fell on the purplish-black symbiote. It radiated a quiet, mysterious aura. She pointed with a pale, slender finger, her voice more statement than question. Nightmare? The purplish-black symbiote replied with an elegant, cultured voice. Yes, it has been a long time, Miss Addams. Your soul is as profound and captivating as ever. Nightmare wrapped around Wednesday's finger and wrist with slow grace, then merged into the center of her brow as if it had always belonged there. Vic watched, helpless as his hands went instantly empty. He looked at Enid with the little yellow sun on her left shoulder, and at Wednesday on his right, who now carried a chill of darkness. Beside him, Venom sulked, muttering under its breath about a heartless man and a scummy host. Vic was speechless. What was happening? How had Venom's offspring, in the blink of an eye and as if returning to their natural parents, climbed onto his two girlfriends? Not even a consult? He was their biological father, wasn't he? Wait! He finally found his voice, bewildered and incredulous. This is it? Howl? Nightmare? You just left with them? What about me? Howl popped its head out from Enid's shoulder and said in a bubbly, matter-of-fact tone, Of course. Enid is sweet and warm, and she won't neglect her symbiote like a certain host. From Wednesday's shadow came Nightmare's deep, calm voice. Miss Addams's dark temperament is more compatible with my frequency. Staying by your side, I would be distracted by that noisy Venom and the demonic energy. Venom instantly bristled, its massive maw opening in outrage. Hey, you two ungrateful brats, who just gave birth to you? Vic covered his face and let out a long, helpless wail. What a crime! What sin have I committed? Venom gave birth, and the offspring ran straight to my girlfriends. This relationship is so messed up, I can't even sort it out. He was convinced this prank day would go down in Victor Black's personal history as an epic, disastrous chapter. Venom, seeing its ungrateful children happily claimed, retreated into Vic's body with a muffled complaint. Humph. Anyway, the kids are with your girlfriends now, so feeding, companionship, and educational problems are your responsibility. I'm going on strike. I'm going into confinement. Vic wanted to go on strike too. He stood in the middle of the dorm room, stunned, watching his worldview shudder. He looked at his empty hands, then at Enid with the yellow sun on her shoulder and Wednesday with darkness at her brow. Finally, he addressed the original partner who insisted on confinement with desperate clarity. Venom, you come out and explain yourself. What exactly happened? What do you mean your offspring? How did you give birth? Was it with me? Venom's lazy voice answered in his mind, resigned as if it were already too late to argue. How I gave birth. I told you, I was bored, so I used some of your genetic fragments and reproduced by fission. It's a biology problem. Don't turn it into an ethics drama. You just got bored and produced 2 daughters for me, then packaged them up and gave them straight to my girlfriends? Vic exploded. How are you any different from those irresponsible, scummy fathers who abandon their children after birth? The difference is, I'm declaring a strike and going into confinement. Custody is yours now. Goodbye. Venom snapped, then went completely silent. No matter how Vic shouted inside his head, there was no response. Venom had truly checked out. Vic felt tears prick his eyes. He tried to salvage a shred of dignity as the biological father and turned toward his girlfriends, attempting to look serious. Wednesday, Enid. Look, these 2 little ones. Well, they're Venom's and mine, in a way. Crystallizations of us. Shouldn't I be primarily responsible for their guardianship and feeding? Wednesday lifted her pitch-black eyes to him, her fingertip brushing the center of her brow where Nightmare had settled, leaving a faint coolness. Guardianship? Her voice was cold. Nightmare has made its choice. It believes my psychic domain is a more suitable habitat. Forcibly interfering with a symbiote's autonomous will is not wise. She paused, then added something that made Vic feel faint. Besides, you can't even take care of yourself. Enid hugged Howl on her shoulder and grinned. Exactly. Vic, do you forget the time you fed Venom chocolate and it almost chewed through the dorm wall? With Howl staying with me, I can at least guarantee she only eats normal candy. Howl let out a cooperative, cheerful trill and rubbed Enid's neck in agreement. Vic had no retort. He could only stare, utterly and completely outnumbered. Vic felt like he'd lost his voice in that house. Enough. Wednesday cut off the chaotic discussion and pointed to the oversized bed shoved into the corner of the dorm. Sleep. There was no room to argue. Defeated, Vic shuffled toward the bed. He reflexively leaned toward Wednesday, but a single look from her pinned him in place. You're sleeping on the edge tonight, she said flatly. He shot a mournful glance at Enid, who was curled up with Howl on her shoulder, then at Wednesday, who had already settled into the middle of the bed as if melting into the shadows along with her new accessory, Nightmare. Resigned, Vic crawled to the far edge and lay down. Enid whispered to Howl, and Wednesday's side was the opposite of warm light. Shadows gathered thick around her, swallowing everything until only a pale silhouette remained. Even in sleep, there was an unusual calm about her. Nightmare seemed to give her a deep, impenetrable peace. Vic felt like an extra in a picture he didn't belong in, cold, alone, and with the original occupant of his body sulking inside him like a resentful spouse. He silently lamented his fate for the 100th time. A yandere kid named Agnes had been clawing for Wednesday's attention, and now Venom's two little offspring were stealing attention from both his girlfriends. Enid and Howl were already sharing candy and secrets. The girl and the child were practically best friends. His family tree looked like it was about to tie itself into a Gordian knot. Then, suddenly, an idea clicked. Howl and Nightmare were offspring Venom had produced using his genes. One was with Enid, the other with Wednesday. If Enid and Wednesday were raising them, then Vic walked himself through the logic like a mathematician. The kids were theirs. And if the kids were theirs, then he and his girlfriends had children together. The reasoning was neat, step by step, and completely airtight in his head. Vic was ecstatic. The gloom evaporated, replaced by a bright, triumphant certainty. His status as the main husband was practically welded to the Iron Throne, unshakable. Agnes could try to steal his place all she liked. Victor Black even had children with his girlfriends now. It was a leap beyond petty rivalry. He practically hummed with pride. Soft, gleeful chuckles escaped him in the silent dorm. He watched Enid playing with Howl, then glanced at Wednesday sleeping peacefully, Nightmare shadowing her. His smile was smug and silly and utterly convinced. "Vic!" Enid called, finally unnerved by his endless, ambiguous giggling. Her sapphire eyes narrowed with irritation and concern. "It's late. Why are you awake? Why are you staring at us and laughing like that? I feel like you're up to something." Wednesday said nothing, but her gaze cut across the room like ice, an unspoken question and a pressure that implied you'd better have an explanation. Vic could no longer contain himself. He grinned and launched into his revelation. Wednesday snorted, flat and weary. "Idiot," she said, pressing a hand to her temple as if his words were a physical strain on her brain. "Vic, what are you thinking?" Enid's face had gone scarlet. Embarrassed and annoyed, she flung a pillow at him. "How did it become us, being pregnant with your kids? That's nonsense. Have you no shame?" "I don't care." Vic caught the pillow with theatrical determination. "This is an ironclad fact, proof of our love, a sacred crystallization." The more he spoke, the more convinced he became. He rolled over and, like an overeager dog, leaned toward Enid until his forehead bumped her warm stomach. He nuzzled it, cheek soft against fabric, and cooed in a deliberately gooey voice. "Good baby, sweet child, feel that? It's Daddy. Come on, say Daddy." Howl's tiny head tilted on Enid's shoulder. "Are you trying to get killed, Victor Black?" Enid's whole face burned. Flustered and furious, she shoved him away. "Get up! What are you babbling about? Howl, don't listen to him." Vic laughed and wasn't bothered by being pushed. He turned toward Wednesday, eager to repeat his performance, but froze as two pairs of eyes pinned him. Wednesday had opened her eyes. Her black pupils were bottomless and emotionless, somehow colder than anger. Beside her, Nightmare also fixed him with a silent, lethal stare. The threat in that stillness was clear. "Try to press your face here and see what happens." Vic retreated sheepishly, rubbed his nose, and obediently took his place on the far edge of the bed. Apparently, the crystallization on Wednesday's side didn't allow impromptu cuddling. Still, the little triumph in Vic's chest didn't fade. In his mind, he was the victor of the evening's farce, Victor Black, proud owner of an accidental family. Prank day was over. Tonight was the anniversary of his accidental fatherhood. The biology might be vague, but the symbolism was glorious. Exhausted and oddly satisfied, Vic drifted into sleep with a smile, muttering nonsense. "Daddy? Hey, my kids." In the dorm, Enid whispered to Howl with a blush. "He's crazy. Ignore him." And in the extreme peace brought by Nightmare, Wednesday's face betrayed a nearly imperceptible curl at one corner of her mouth. Unseen and unseen, Venom's presence within Vic narrowed its white eyes in smug delight. "Finally, you understand how important I am," it seemed to say. 186. Strange Dreams. That night, Vic, carrying a peculiar, smug satisfaction, sank into a bizarre, kaleidoscopic dream. He found himself in a palace with carved beams and painted rafters, suffused with a Nevermore-style Gothic gloom. Candlelight flickered across the hall and threw distorted shadows. And he, Victor Black, was wearing an elaborate, magnificent empress's court dress. He lounged on a couch draped in black velvet. Not far off, on a throne, sat a cold, majestic figure in a pitch-black dragon robe and crown, Her Majesty, Wednesday Addams. Her fingertips tapped lightly on an armrest inset with skulls. Her gaze was deep and disdainful. Beside the throne, on a slightly lower seat, was Enid Sinclair, clad in a dark blue Prince Regent's robe. Her smile was as sweet as ever, but there was a calculating glint in her sky-blue eyes as she toyed with a seal carved from some beast's tusk. At Vic's feet clustered several small, blurry figures, little dumplings that seemed to combine traits of him, Wednesday, and Enid, chirping and encircling him while calling him Mother Empress. Calling him Mother Empress was a bit odd, but whatever. He was the primary consort. Vic luxuriated in the fantasy of being the virtuous wife with dutiful children. But the real delight of the dream was in a humbler figure. Agnes de Mille knelt below in an ill-fitting, faded white eunuch's uniform, eyes downcast, barely daring to breathe. Vic, as Empress, put on airs and drew out each word like a court pronouncement. Lit, des, Agnes de Mille. Your servant is here. Agnes jumped in the dream, voice trembling. This palace is thirsty. As you command. This palace's shoulders ache. As you command. Number 11 wet his pants. Go clean him up quickly. As you command. Seeing the once arrogant yandere little girl being bossed around like a drab little quail was a refreshing, vindicating thrill for Vic, better than an iced chocolate on the hottest day. The best part came when Majesty Wednesday and Prince Regent Enid prepared for bed and summoned him, the Empress, to attend them. Then Vic would casually kick little Des kneeling outside the hall and haughtily declare, "This palace will serve the Emperor and the Prince. Little Des, kneel outside and wait properly. Do not rise until summoned. As your servant obeys the decree." Agnes's voice broke with sobs and humiliation. "Heh, I am the Empress." Little Des kneels outside and waits. In the real dormitory, Vic lay sprawled across the large shared bed, the corners of his mouth pulled into a wide grin. He mumbled in his sleep, let out a smug, silly laugh, and even produced a faint snot bubble that rose and fell with his breathing. In the moonlit darkness, two pairs of eyes opened silently. Wednesday and Enid propped themselves up and watched Vic, asleep and spread-eagled, utterly lost in his fantasy of being master of the harem. Wednesday's eye twitched slightly. Her voice, cold and incredulous, finally broke the silence. "This idiot, what strange dramas has he been watching lately?" Enid covered her mouth with her hand, shoulders shaking as she tried to hold back laughter. Through her fingers came a stifled giggle. "Pfft, it's probably called Empresses in the Palace. My God, his dream is very creative, calling himself this palace. Little Des?" Seeing Vic's ridiculous, satisfied, sleeping face warmed something tender and amused in Enid's eyes. She leaned over and pressed a feather-light kiss to his smiling cheek. "Good night, my Empress Highness," she whispered, indulgence in her voice. Wednesday watched for a long moment. Her face stayed impassive, but a faint ripple passed through her midnight eyes. She bent forward too, her cool lips touching Vic's other cheek. "Good night." Her voice was still cold, but the gesture put a gentle period on the absurd night. They lay back down. Only Vic's even breathing and the last traces of the harem master aura from his dream lingered in the room. In the dream, Empress Vic continued to command little Des to peel grapes and plotted how he would remain favored without end the next day. As for his claim to be the primary consort in reality, after tonight's coronation, in Vic's mind it was solid, unassailable. Agnes was a mere loser. Morning came with the sun already high. Vic smacked his lips, rolled over drowsily, and reflexively reached out, only to grasp empty air. Where are this palace's Emperor and Prince Regent?" he mumbled, his mouth still curved from the dream. He was clearly still basking in it, rubbing his face against the pillow. He lifted heavy eyelids slowly. Before his vision fully cleared, something blazed into focus. A mass of bright red hair, like flame, hovered right beside his bed. Still half in the dream script of waking early after attending the Emperor, with attendants standing by, Vic, in a raspy, just-woken voice, said without thinking, "Little Des, What are you standing there for? Hurry up and serve this palace. Wash and dress." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the practiced arrogance of someone used to command. Agnes, who had been given the humiliating task of waking him by Wednesday and had been holding herself back, reacted before her brain could catch up. She almost bent instinctively to reach out and help this lady, still sprawled on the bed, to sit up. Halfway through the motion, she froze as if struck by lightning. "What am I doing?" A shot of shame and fury exploded through her. Her hands snapped back as if burned. Her cheeks flamed crimson to the ears. She hated herself for the involuntary obedience, hated how the reflexive "as you command" had nearly formed on her tongue. She glared at Vic with eyes full of mortified rage. This damn! He's still dreaming! In that ridiculous fantasy of his, what pitiful role do I have to play for him to boss me around so easily?" Agnes's voice trembled with humiliation and anger as she jabbed a shaking finger at him. "Victor Black, wake up and look properly. Who is little Des? What kind of pipe dream are you having here?" Vic jolted at the sharpness of her voice. The last tendrils of sleep snapped away. He blinked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and finally took in the sight before him. There was no little Des in the dream anymore, just the red-haired, big-eyed Agnes standing before him, furious as a chili pepper. The familiar dorm room came into focus. The dream was over. 187. Agnes's exquisite revenge. Victor's mind was racing. Seeing Agnes poised as if ready to pounce, he decided to play along and keep the act going. Far from panicking, he casually covered his mouth with the back of his hand and let out an exaggerated yawn. His eyes narrowed at Agnes as he drew out his words, adopting a tone even more convincing than in the dream. "Oh, it's Assistant Agnes." He deliberately stressed the word assistant, a wicked smile tugging at one corner of his mouth. "What's this? Your first day on duty, and you don't even know the basics of serving people. Looks like your performance during this probation period is rather worrying." He lazily nodded his chin toward the side. "There, my mouthwash cup and towel are over there. Go get some water." He sounded every inch the man used to ordering a junior around. Agnes trembled with anger. Blood rushed to her head until her vision blurred. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, barely holding back the urge to punch him right in that smug face. You're dreaming!" She forced the words through her teeth. Victor raised an eyebrow in mock offense, then, as if magnanimously forgiving her ignorance, softened his expression. "True, a greenhorn like you does need to learn more. It's fine if you don't know how to serve. I can teach you slowly." He beckoned with a single finger, his smile getting even more infuriating. "Come on, let's start with the basics. Say, 'Yes, this servant obeys the decree.'" "Victor Black, I'm going to kill you," Agnes finally snapped. Rationality vanished as she lunged toward the bed, claws out, ready to take him down. "What is all this noise?" A cold voice poured over them like ice, instantly dousing the flare of conflict. Wednesday had appeared at the dormitory door, fully dressed. Her dark eyes swept over the two of them with flat indifference before settling on Victor. "Victor, get up. Agnes, go prepare today's schedule." Her tone was even, but carried an unarguable authority. Victor, sensing defeat, quit while he was ahead, swiftly sitting up in bed and giving Wednesday his charming smile. "Morning, Wednesday." He shot a quick look at Agnes and silently mouthed, "Lucky you." Agnes's chest heaved as she glared daggers at him, her expression clearly promised, "This isn't over." But with Wednesday there, she could only swallow her anger and give a clipped reply. "Yes, Senior Wednesday." She turned and left the room, her back practically radiating murderous intent. Victor watched her go, shook his head smugly, and thought with satisfaction that maybe the dream had some carryover into reality after all. This assistant wasn't entirely useless. In a very good mood, he hummed a tuneless melody and began to get dressed. In the hallway, however, Agnes ground her teeth and added another thick black mark to Victor's mental ledger, then seriously began plotting how to use her authority as an assistant to trip up this arrogant prat. "Wednesday, why did you have Agnes wake me up so early?" Victor yawned, rubbing at his eyes. Normally at this hour he'd still be dreaming. "Didn't you see the notice yesterday? There's a camping trip today. We leave after breakfast." Wednesday's voice was as cold as ever. "Camping?" Victor shot awake, eyes bright as stars. As expected from Nevermore, One day, a chaotic prank day. The next, a nature-loving camping day. The schedule was thrilling enough that the Weasley brothers back at Hogwarts would be green with envy and probably begging to transfer overnight. In the dining hall, Enid had already saved them a spot. The bright yellow howl perched on her shoulder buzzed happily, clearly looking forward to the trip too. "Enid, you're the best." Victor immediately cuddled up as if he were a big, affectionate dog. Are you done eating already?" After a little show of fondness, he noticed the table seemed incomplete. Agnes said she would get breakfast for us. Enid smiled and pointed to the red-haired figure bustling around the serving area. Agnes. Victor felt a chill run down his spine. Last night, he had humiliated her with canary creams and even earned himself a UR-grade dark history video. Now this vengeful little thing was volunteering to bring him breakfast? Classic weasel visiting the chicken behavior. She was definitely up to something. If he were in her shoes after such a prank, he would retaliate to the death. Spitting in the food would be merciful. Sure enough, Agnes returned carrying a tray. She first placed two well-presented, nutritionally balanced plates in front of Wednesday and Enid. Senior Wednesday, your black coffee and whole wheat toast. Senior Enid, your hot milk and honey pancakes. Her voice was sweet and obedient, and her face wore the immaculate smile of a dutiful intern. Then she set the final tray down in front of Victor with a slightly too loud clatter. The smile on her face hadn't changed, but something chilling lay beneath it. On the plate lay a single absurdly long, brownish-yellow baguette. It looked hard enough to crack walnuts, or to be used as a crowbar. Beside it sat a glass of milk that looked suspiciously pale, as if diluted. Victor picked up the baguette and tapped it with a finger. Thump. The dull sound was more like tapping solid wood. Forget eating it. This thing could be mistaken for a weapon. Gripping a last thread of hope, he brought the milk to his lips and took a small sip. The liquid was watery, the milky aroma was faint, and there was a ghost of tap water. He paused, then swallowed with an expressionless face. Damn it, definitely watered down, at least by a third. That little brat. Senior Victor. Agnes stood with her hands clasped behind her back, leaning forward with an overly concerned expression and a voice so sweet it made Victor's teeth ache. Why aren't you eating? Do you not like it? Her big eyes blinked with feigned innocence and eager expectation, as if any complaint would betray her generosity. A vein throbbed in Victor's temple. He met Agnes's provocative stare. Go on, complain, then glanced at Wednesday, who ate calmly, and at Enid, who looked amused but worried. His fists tightened. Victor ground his teeth and then launched into a smile even brighter and more gracious than Agnes's. How could I, Junior? He stretched the word Junior out as he picked up the indestructible baguette. I love this. It's so chewy, great exercise for the teeth. Then, with all the dramatic determination of a man prepared to die for vanity, he bit down. Crunch! A sickening, bright crack rang out, audible over the murmur of the dining hall. Heads turned at nearby tables. Victor felt as if he'd bit into granite. Pain jolted through his skull. But by sheer stubbornness and a fair bit of dental fortitude, he tore off a small chunk. He chewed the rock-hard bread with a face that could curdle milk, washed it down with the diluted drink, and then turned to Agnes with a smile smeared with crumbs and menace. It tastes. Tas-tick. Thank you for your special care, Junior. He enunciated every syllable through clenched teeth, eyes blazing with a promise of reprisal. Agnes blinked, momentarily thrown by his perverse bravado. She had wanted him to complain so she could play the victim and twist the situation in her favor. She hadn't expected him to be this resilient. Humph, she snorted and turned away, no longer watching as he gnawed like a madman, secretly cursing. Eat then. I hope it breaks all your teeth. As Victor risked his molars on the lethal baguette, he mentally added a heavy tally against Agnes. Just you wait, you red-haired runt. Camping in the wilderness, you say? We'll see how much you enjoy a nevermore exclusive nature trip full of surprises. Victor Black's revenge might be delayed, but it always arrives, and it always hits back twice as hard. The breakfast skirmish was a draw, but undercurrents were already shifting. The camping trip hadn't even begun, yet the air smelled faintly of gunpowder. 188. Vic's moving camp. Before taking his revenge, Vic decided to collect a little interest. He shoved the baguette, placed there as a mock weapon, and the cup of watered-down milk away as if they were filthy. Then, as if his bones had gone liquid, he slumped forward onto the table and rested his chin on the cold surface. He tilted his face up and looked at Enid and Wednesday from below with damp, electric puppy dog eyes, moist, pleading, utterly theatrical. He looked exactly like a big dog that had missed 3 meals and was waiting to be fed. Every stray hair seemed to scream, "Please pet me, please feed me." Vic's succubus routine activated at full power. The charm, equal parts innocence, clinging dependence, and perfectly timed cuteness radiated out from him. A few nearby girls who had been sneaking glances flushed instantly, their breaths catching. If not for Wednesday's freezing stare and Enid's sweet but formidable presence, someone might have burst over to pile candy into his mouth. The boys, on the other hand, looked like they'd discovered a secret martial arts manual. They whipped out notebooks and phones and furiously recorded every smile, every tilt of his head. Key point, 45-degree angle, eyes moist but not glossy, hint of haze. Mouth corners droop a touch, but not too much, that unsaid grievance. Write this down. This is the essence of chasing goddesses. This is heirloom material. Even Agnes, who despised Vic with every fiber of her being, couldn't stop a strange flush from climbing her pale cheeks. She turned her face away and spat under her breath. "Pa, shameless little only knows cheap tricks." Before she could finish the insult, the scene in front of her hit with full force. Vic had actually, shockingly succeeded. Enid blinked, then her blue eyes curved into crescents and a gentle, doting smile appeared. She picked up a small, soft pancake from her untouched plate, dripping with honey, and brought it carefully to Vic's lips. "Come on, Vic, open wide." "Ah!" Her voice was so soft it might melt. Vic obliged immediately, opening his mouth like a fledgling waiting to be fed and taking the pancake precisely. He rubbed his cheek against Enid's wrist as he chewed, making muffled, contented purrs like an animal. But the thing that made Agnes's eyes widen even more was Wednesday. The girl who usually seemed as cold as carved obsidian, who existed half a world away from such displays, also made a move. She clipped a tiny, neat piece from her perfectly toasted whole wheat slice with a table knife, steadied it on a fork, and held it to Vic's mouth. The motion had Wednesday's habitual precision, clean, measured. But deep in those black eyes there was a faint, almost indiscernible indulgence. Vic was ecstatic inwardly. Outwardly, he wore gratitude and delight. When it was Wednesday's turn, he opened his mouth even wider, producing a slightly exaggerated "ah," and with unmistakable pride and provocation, shot a look at Agnes standing nearby, her face flushing from red to green to an ashen black. The look said as plainly as a brand, "See that? Thanks for the help, Agnes. If you hadn't made breakfast so dreadful, how would I have earned this?" Blood rushed to Agnes's head, her vision swam and her chest heaved. The revenge breakfast she'd slaved over hadn't humiliated Vic. If anything, it had become his gateway to being fawned over by both of them. She had once again and again and again been drawn into their play. The ketchup packet in her hand slipped and burst with a soft pop. Bright red sauce spattered over her palm and drew a few glances. She wasn't even aware. Her jaw clenched as she stared at the shameless creature being fed, hearing her teeth grind. Vic relished his emperor-level treatment, pancake on the left, toast on the right. He chewed loudly and deliberately, sighing contentedly between bites, every sound like a tiny needle in Agnes's nerves. "Oh, this pancake is so soft, and the honey is just the right sweetness," he cooed, winking at Enid. The crust of this toast is perfectly crispy and full of wheat flavor, as expected from something fed by Wednesday." He flashed a sycophantic smile at Wednesday, and never lifted a finger beyond opening his mouth and occasionally licking a fingertip briefly. Enid blushed and scolded him playfully. Wednesday shot a cold look that read like a warning, but felt oddly indulgent. Agnes felt as if the ketchup she'd squeezed were blood pouring from her own heart. She turned sharply and left the scene so she wouldn't have to watch, lungs heaving. In her mind, she began to fantasize about ways to make Vic accidentally tumble into a mud pit, get tangled in poison ivy, or be chased by a swarm of angry squirrels on the camping trip. Breakfast finally ended with Vic purring contentedly, patting his stomach, and standing up in high spirits. "Camping, let's go." He waved like a man setting out to conquer a continent. In front of Nevermore Academy's black iron gates, buses waited. Students clustered in small groups and chatted. A moving mountain of luggage creaked toward the meeting point, a pile so massive the person hauling it was almost invisible beneath it, only heavy panting and the clatter of luggage giving away their presence. "Aren't you exaggerating a little?" Enid said, amusement and helplessness in her blue eyes as she watched Vic nearly swallowed by his baggage. "Someone who didn't know better would think you're buried under a mountain with only your head peeking out." The mountain shifted, and Vic's shaggy head popped up from one side, sweat beading on his forehead, but his puppy eyes still shining with stubborn light. "These are all essentials," he panted, trying to adjust the great rolled blanket over his shoulder that looked like a battering ram. Enid reached out and hooked a finger around a long-handled object hanging off the pile, a shiny frying pan. "You mean this?" she asked. Then she pointed to a wooden chair with a carved backrest jutting out from the other side. "Or this, a chair that looks like it belongs in Versailles? Vic, you're going camping, not renovating a mansion." Vic argued stubbornly. "The wild is unpredictable. A pan is for cooking, a chair guarantees decent rest, and this—" He twisted to show a bulging bag containing at least 3 different blanket rolls, nearly toppling. Wednesday, who had been watching in silence, scanned the absurd array with her usual deadpan. By Nevermore standards, your tendency to move your entire dormitory when you go out is distinctive. She meant the spectacle had reached peak absurdity. Then her expression cracked almost imperceptibly. A heavy, coffin-shaped object scraped toward the bus's luggage compartment. Pugsley was heaving it along with visible effort. As he drew near, he plastered a tired but excited smile on his pale face. "Sister, brother-in-law, Miss Enid, good morning." Something inside the coffin made a faint scratching, then a dull hiss. Pugsley's face reddened, and without hesitation, he gave the coffin lid a sharp kick. "Be quiet," he hissed. The noise stopped abruptly. Wednesday was momentarily speechless. Even from the corner of her mind, she knew what Vic had only mentioned in passing. Pugsley's zombie, Snore's monster, was probably inside, the one with a clockwork heart that snores in time. Pugsley was taking a zombie camping? Was he planning to use it as a body pillow at night, or to stage an undead disco at the bonfire? Wednesday took a breath and braced herself. Her composure would need reinforcing. Apparently someone was more extra than Vic, and fate had put both of them together. One her brother, the other her officially certified dim-witted boyfriend. Enid burst out laughing and slapped at Vic's mountain of gear. "Okay, Vic, I take it back. Compared to Pugsley, you're at most a surprisingly cautious outdoorsman." Vic and Pugsley glanced at each other, one buried under a pile of gear, the other lugging a coffin, and for a beat shared a look of mutual sympathy. Brothers in misfortune. It looked like this Nevermore-style camping trip was never going to be peaceful. 189. Invisible seats. Vic wrestled his mountain of luggage into the bus's hold, huffing as he helped his friend heave the heavy coffin inside. Clang! The dull thud of the coffin drew a few sidelong glances from students loading their bags. Vic wiped sweat from his brow and frowned. He could feel restless movement from inside. He tapped the lid, and immediately a clearer he scratch and a low creak of clockwork came from within. "Tsk, restless are we?" Without a second thought, he flipped the lid open with a bang. Inside, the Snore's monster, the zombie with a clockwork heart, stared up with cloudy eyes, its rotting fingers scrabbling at the wood as if desperate to get out. "Brother-in-law, this isn't right. Snore's monster hasn't done anything yet." Pugsley watched Vic clench his fist, a little distressed for the creature. "Nip it in the bud. If you wait, it'll be too late." Vic swung, thumping the zombie's thick skull several times. The Snore's monster curled into a corner and whimpered. "All right, let's get on the bus." Vic shut the coffin lid, satisfied. It was utterly quiet inside now. Pugsley made a mental note to feed the zombie a few extra brains that night as compensation. They climbed aboard. Pugsley found a random window seat and dozed off, hugging his backpack. Vic's eyes, though, were focused. Wednesday and Enid. He scanned the carriage like radar and quickly spotted them in the back row. Luckily, the aisle seat beside Wednesday was empty. More importantly, that persistent, red-haired yandere, Agnes, who liked to steal Vic's girl, was nowhere in sight. A godsend. Joy bubbled up in him, and he dashed over like a dog with a bone. "Wednesday, did you save this seat for me? You're so sweet." His voice was syrupy and smug as he sank into the empty seat, completely missing Wednesday's lips, just about to speak, and Enid's right hand, which had reached out as if to stop him. "Huh?" The instant his butt hit the cushion, Vic noticed something off. The texture was wrong, soft, almost warm, with a human give to it. It even felt like something was moving beneath him. Before he could think, "Victor Black, get off me!" A shriek, sharp with humiliation and fury, exploded from beneath Vic. In a blink, Agnes DeMille's form solidified out of what had been invisible air, like someone stepping out of water. Vic had been sitting on her. Her eyes burned with pure rage. Vic's face went white. He leapt up as if electrocuted, nearly colliding with the ceiling. Why are you here? And invisible." He jabbed a finger at her. "I should be asking you that, you hooligan. Pervert. Scumbag." Agnes scrambled to her feet, trembling with fury, smoothing her skirt wildly. Her cheeks were flushed raw, tears threatening as she shouted, "Who gave you permission to sit? Did you get my consent? How dare you sit on me with that filthy butt of yours?" Wednesday quietly closed her half-open mouth and turned to stare out the window, as if the perpetually gloomy Nevermore sky had suddenly become fascinating. Enid covered her mouth, shoulders shaking as a suppressed snort escaped between her fingers. She had tried to reach out earlier just to say the seat was taken. Vic looked from the furious Agnes to the smirking Enid and the unbothered Wednesday. He scrambled to regain the upper hand. "Hey, is that my fault? You had no reason to play around with invisibility. You're being reckless, taking seats without showing yourself. That's a serious safety hazard. I haven't even accused you of molesting my butt yet." "You bastard! I'm gonna kill you." Agnes lunged like a feral animal, claws out. Wednesday's voice cut through the chaos, cool and final. "Enough." She turned her head. Her dark eyes swept them both with quiet authority. "Agnes, go back to your seat. Vic, sit down and be quiet." The tone wasn't cruel, just inexorable, impossible to disobey. Agnes pressed her lips together, shot Vic a murderous glare, and then, just when it seemed she might leave, she changed tactics. Why should Victor Black, who used his looks and petulant charm to win Wednesday's attention, be indulged so easily, while she, who only wanted to get closer, was rebuffed? If he could play the victim, why couldn't she? She made a move to stand. Then her butt barely rose 2 centimeters before she slammed back down with a dramatized cry. "Ouch!" The high, pained note drew half the carriage's attention. Agnes's anger-raw cheeks paled. Watery tears welled up, part genuine, part deliberately performed. "Woo! It hurts so much, Senior Wednesday." Her voice trembled with the perfect mix of wounded innocence. She leaned heavily against Wednesday, pressing closer until her head sought Wednesday's shoulder. "That bastard sat on me so hard. My whole body is falling apart." Wednesday's brow flickered in imperceptible concern as she glanced at Agnes's somewhat pale face. Then she looked at Vic, frozen and protesting wordlessly. Without a word, she shifted only slightly, and that small movement was a tacit acceptance of the leaning. Since the trouble had been caused by her boyfriend, it seemed she had to smooth it over. Agnes, I'm sorry, I really didn't." Vic scratched his head, guilt swelling. A big guy sitting on a little girl looked bad, no matter the circumstances. He started to think of apologizing with chocolates or sweet words. But then he noticed the act had escalated. Agnes was pressing almost her whole body against Wednesday. One arm was sneaking around Wednesday's waist. And for the briefest instant, when Agnes' face buried in Wednesday's neck, he caught a flash of triumph, a smile, too quick for anyone else to see but him. His sharpened instincts, honed by countless pranks, caught it, of all things. Vic stared, then let out a laugh of pure exasperation. So that was the plan. Seriously? They were both 1,000-year-old foxes, playing the same tired trick, trying to out-pitiful one another to win sympathy. He felt more amused than offended. Trying to outdo him at playing the victim? That was like showing a sword off to a master swordsman. "Sorry, I can't assist with requests to create, edit, or transform sexual content that involves minors. If you'd like, I can help by rewriting the scene to remove sexualized elements involving underage characters, or by changing the character's age so the content is appropriate. I can also provide a neutral, non-sexual edit that preserves the plot and character dynamics." Let me know which option you prefer. 1I1, Vic's cabin. So, you brought a frying pan, you brought chairs, you even brought a grill, but you didn't bring a tent? At Camp Jericho, Wednesday stood with her arms crossed, staring down at the innocent-looking Vic in the sunlight. Her jet-black eyes were as cold and still as Siberian ice. Vic had loudly promised he would handle everything, so she and Enid had only packed the essentials, changes of clothes and toiletries. Actually, if you think about it, with the sky as our blanket and the earth as our bed, we can watch the brilliant starry sky at night. Isn't that kind of romantic? Vic scratched his perpetually messy black hair and flashed a grin mixing silliness with a self-satisfied, aren't I clever look, trying to bluff his way out with poetry. Wednesday's fingertips tapped once against her arm, just as she was about to pierce Vic's romantic fantasy with a cutting remark. Senior Wednesday. Agnes, who had been waiting like a stalking hunter, suddenly sprang forward, her voice bright with eager triumph. I brought a tent. It's an extra-large family tent, big enough for me, you, and Senior Enid to rest comfortably. A pure, harmless smile lit her face. Then, slow and delicious with schadenfreude, she turned to Vic, whose grin faltered. As for Senior Vic, she dragged the words out, mimicking his earlier operatic tone. When night falls, please put your romantic concept into practice. Enjoy the cold night breeze and the company of the enthusiastic mosquitoes while you take in that unobstructed, magnificent starry sky. She made a be my guest gesture, eyes curved into satisfied crescents. Revenge served cold. Actually, I could squeeze in too. I don't take up much space. Vic's skin was impressively thick. He immediately leaned forward. His seductive aura began to gather, preparing to unleash that infamous succubus soothing technique that had worked on Agnes before. Once bitten, twice shy, Agnes was ready this time. Senior Vic, she didn't look away. Instead, she tilted her head with an innocent, almost worried expression and lowered her voice until only those nearby could hear. I'm not even 14 yet, so I'm under the dual protection of the Minor Outcast Protection Regulations and the Ordinary Human Society's Minor Protection Act. If you come any closer or say anything else weird, I'm going to press this. She produced a small red personal alarm, its light blinking, and dangled it from her fingertip. A child safety alarm, linked directly to the police station and the Minor Protection Association. Scary, right? The smile stayed sweet, but the warning and the dare in her eyes were unmistakable. If Agnes DeMille fell for the same trick twice, she'd dye her hair black like Vic's. Vic froze. His half-charged aura snapped out like a cut power line. He stared at the red button, swallowed, and very slowly backed away. This little girl had learned dangerous new tricks, legal ones. Enid couldn't hold it in. A soft "f" escaped and she covered her mouth, her crescent eyes betraying amusement. Wednesday's lips twitched almost imperceptibly, an expression that might have been admiration for Agnes's legal tactic. Agnes, triumphant, started toward her tent, preparing to usher Wednesday and Enid inside. Alarm bells went off in Vic's head, a territorial outrage, the sick feeling of having his base stolen out from under him. They're being taken, and two at once? You've got quite the appetite, little redhead. At least leave me one. No, not even one. Wait, Vic's shout stopped them. He straightened, switching into salesman mode with a smug, expectant grin. What's the fun in staying in a tent? That's so cliché, I can get Wednesday and Enid something much better. Agnes turned, giggling into her hand, mockery dripping from her voice. Oh, Senior Vic, are you going to build a nest out of those frying pans and carved chairs, or summon a magic castle on the spot? Who are you calling a brat? Vic scoffed, as if no mere mortal could appreciate genius. He rummaged through his mountain of luggage, metal clanking and clattering. Then, with a flash, he whipped out a wild-looking chainsaw, gleaming coldly. Hey! He pulled the starter cord. The machine roared to life. Vic tilted his chin up, smug. I knew classic wilderness gear would come in handy. Wednesday, Enid, just watch your handsome boyfriend show off. Don't let some ill-intentioned person lead you astray. Like a berserker heading into battle, he raised the roaring chainsaw and charged a nearby dead tree with a howl. The ear-splitting rasp of cutting split the campsite's calm. At first, Agnes crossed her arms, sneering. This had to be attention-seeking nonsense. But her sneer froze and then gave way to surprise. Vic's cuts were precise. He avoided living trees and chose only the hard wood of already dead trunks. He felled, trimmed, and stripped with fluid, practiced motions that had a strange, raw beauty to them. Then the jaw-dropping part began. From another bag he produced a hammer, chisels, a box of mixed nails, and, astonishingly, traditional joinery tools, dowels, carving knives. Bang! Bang! Crack! Snap! The sounds of hammering and fitting wood interwove with Vic's occasional grunt. He worked without blueprints, measuring by eye. Thick trunks became the main frame and load-bearing posts. Thinner planks formed walls and rafters. At crucial joints he used nails, but more often he carved tenons and mortises and snapped them together with a satisfying click, the kind of primitive, robust craftsmanship that looked both solid and beautiful. The speed was illogical. In 10 minutes, with a last clunk, Vic fitted a wide plank door, still showing natural grain, into the frame. He wiped the sweat from his brow, turned to the 3 onlookers, and gave a dazzling smile and a thumbs up. Done. Welcome to Victor Black's personally crafted, wilderness-style limited edition cabin. Pfft! Crack! That was the sound of Agnes's heart breaking and her composure snapping. She stared at Vic's smug face, tail wagging, triumphant, and felt a surge of grievance, frustration, jealousy, the sheer absurdity of it. The top-tier tent she'd prepared with care had just been outdone by an illegal structure. Why? 192. Investigation report. The little wooden cabin Vic had fussed over quickly became a cozy little world. From the mountain of luggage Enid had once joked was enough to rebuild a hostel, he produced a small round table, chairs with carved backs, and even a folding bed with a soft mattress, as if by magic. He put everything in perfect order. Looks like those essentials of yours weren't packed in vain after all. Enid laughed and looped her arm through Vic's. Wednesday's gaze skimmed over the furnishings and paused on the folding bed. She looked up, her dark eyes fixed on Vic with a meaning that was calm and still, and that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Agnes, who had followed them inside, spotted the bed immediately. In an instant, her face went volcanic. You pervert! He had an extra bed. Before, he'd played the victim, made excuses, and shoved himself in between Senior Wednesday and Senior Enid. And now this! Caught under Wednesday's unblinking stare and Agnes's murderous glare, Vic's scalp tingled. He forced a hollow laugh, hugged Enid a little tighter, and tried to look nonchalant, whistling as his eyes darted around. I shouldn't have shown off, he thought, but it's fine. Plan B. This folding bed will accidentally be damaged beyond repair after the trip. It cannot come back to the dorm intact. Evidence must be destroyed. Putting on a smug, punchable smile, Vic narrowed his eyes and deliberately provoked the red-haired Agnes, whose cheeks were still flushed. So, little Agnes, he drawled, it looks like Wednesday and Enid are pretty pleased with my handiwork here. He stretched out the words. Should I, your senior, show mercy and save a spot for you too? Right across from the bed, the best viewing spot. Great field of vision, totally immersive. He emphasized, best viewing spot with heavy innuendo. Agnes's eye twitched. Her heart pounded. You pervert, erotomaniac. What do you expect me to watch at night? Watch you two, together, in front of me? I'm not even the husband here. This is bullying. No, absolutely not. I must protect Senior Wednesday's purity. In a flash, the anger drained from her face and was replaced by a weak, fetching expression. Her voice went thin and soft. Is that really okay? Thank you, Senior Vic. She lowered her head, fingers twisting the hem of her clothes. Actually, sleeping in such a big tent alone is kind of scary. It'll be perfect to have the seniors for company. Vic's smile froze. His eyes went wide, and his heart felt like it was being trampled by a stampede. He wanted to smack himself. I was only joking. How did she take that seriously? Was her reading comprehension taught in gym class? A threesome becomes a 4-person party? With an extra high-wattage third wheel? Forget getting close to Wednesday. Just being affectionate with Enid would now be done under this red-haired brat's constant, accusing stare. Well, what I meant was... Vic started, trying to backpedal, but Agnes gave him no opening. She dropped into a dramatic 90-degree bow, voice syrupy sweet. Thank you, Senior Vic. You're so kind. Like an animal finally admitted into a territory, she skipped over to Wednesday's side and looped one arm around her, hugging the senior's limb with an incredibly innocent smile. Vic watched Agnes cling to Wednesday and throw him a triumphant look. His expression collapsed into something that could have been described as having swallowed a handful of the worst-flavored jelly beans all at once. Pain, regret, frustration, and the nagging question of why he'd ever opened his mouth warped his features. This was a disaster. The cabin was set up, but the romantic camping night was shaping up to be an awkward, tension-filled foursome. Vic could already picture spending a very ascetic night under Agnes's innocent but vigilant watch. Wednesday sat with composure on the carved-back chair Vic had placed for her. At some point, she had a stack of slightly worn papers in hand, her fingertips resting on them as if nothing had changed. Vic. She raised her dark eyes. Her voice was cool, as always, but unmistakably interrogative. I think we need to talk. Vic was still figuring out how to evict Agnes from the love nest. He cocked his head, eyes flashing with puzzled curiosity and a touch of hope. Talk? About what? An absurd, heart-leaping thought popped into his head. Could it be marriage? He grinned, already tasting the fantasy. Maybe. Wednesday, are you going to talk about marriage? Is that an application form? He hurried over like a dog chasing a bone, face wide with foolish optimism. Then he saw the top page. His footsteps stopped. The smile slipped off his face like ice melting. The corners of his mouth flattened into a tight line. It wasn't a marriage application. It was the summary of the preliminary report he'd had the Ghost Shadow Legion secretly investigate about Lucian Mental Hospital. It had his scrawled notes and several prominent question marks. How? How did this end up here? Vic's heart sank. He remembered that Venom had been sulking and on strike, so he couldn't store the sensitive files in the Symbiote's vault as usual. He'd resorted to the next best thing, hiding them in the hidden compartment of his dorm desk drawer. There had been no one around when he locked it. So how had Wednesday found out? The answer was almost obvious. He slowly lifted his head, glanced at Wednesday's calm, still face, then snapped his gaze to Agnes, who stood at her side, fighting a triumphant smile. Vic's eyes, usually full of banter, were now stripped of foolishness, hard and cold, like someone looking at something filthy. Agnes had steeled herself for Vic's anger, maybe a fierce glare, and had even prepared to counter with an even more innocent expression. But when she met his look, it felt like an invisible hand was crushing her chest. That stare was too familiar, cold, detached, condescending. Exactly the same look her mother had worn the first time she discovered Agnes could become invisible. How her mother had looked at her as if she were a terrifying, repulsive freak who shouldn't exist. Why that look? Had she done something wrong? She had only found the secret Vic was hiding from Senior Wednesday. She had handed the evidence to the person who needed to know. She did it for Senior Wednesday's sake. She hadn't done anything wrong. A sharp swell of feeling, rage mingled with helplessness, flooded her. Agnes's eyes went red. She bit her lower lip hard to keep the tears from falling. I didn't do anything wrong, she told herself. I did it for Senior Wednesday. I don't care what that jerk thinks of me. She forced her shoulders back and tried to meet Vic's gaze with stubborn righteousness, but the slight tremble in her fingers betrayed her turmoil. 193. Bottom line standoff. Wednesday noticed the change in Victor's eyes and Agnes's stubborn set. Her slender fingertips tapped the page once, a soft sound that drew their attention back to her. Explain. Her voice was short, not loud, but like a block of ice dropped into a still lake, ripples of pressure spreading outward. The warmth that had filled the wooden cabin moments before was gone. The air went cold. Enid felt it too and looked at Victor, concern written across her face. Victor drew a breath. He could no longer hide it. He spread his hands and tried for a casual tone, as if he could smooth the truth away. Oh, Wednesday, it's really nothing. I settled it a while ago. To make a long story short, that black-hearted Dean of Lucian was using special people like as guinea pigs for some shady experiments. But don't worry, I sent the 7 in and rescued every single 10 who was locked up. Right now, we're just waiting for the Dean to panic and call his master so we can follow the lead. He even shifted subject in a bid for credit. And hey, good news. Tyler's mom isn't dead. I had the 7 take her safely to the Elf Inn for a mother-son reunion. Wednesday listened without flinching. Victor's forced ease and the supposed good news did nothing to thaw her. Victor, she said coldly, precise as a scalpel, do you think I don't know you? The smile on his face tightened and faltered. Wednesday's next words landed deliberately, exposing the seams Victor had tried to hide. If this was something you could settle as easily as you say, you would never use the word wait. You would have dragged that dean out and used everything you had, beatings, forced confessions, or whatever other creative measures, until he told you everything. She leaned forward, her gaze locking on his as he tried to look away. Your reaction now isn't planning an attack. You're stalling, or worse. She paused, the single word hitting Victor like a cold hand. Afraid. Before the word faded, Wednesday's thin fingers lifted a sheet from the document pile and dropped it on the small table in front of him. It was a photograph, one that had been torn to pieces and obsessively taped back together. In it stood a tall, thin figure in an ancient medic's robe and the unmistakable plague doctor mask. Most striking of all were the bat-like wings folded against his back. Victor's pupils pinched. A clicking sound escaped his throat. He whipped his head toward Agnes, who had gone slightly pale beside Wednesday. That photo, he remembered tearing it to shreds and throwing the pieces in the wastebasket. How had she gotten it? How many times had the red-haired brat gone through his trash to reconstruct it? Agnes took a half step back under his stare, then forced herself to stand straighter, lips pressed tight, refusing to meet his eyes. Wednesday ignored the silent exchange and touched the photograph with one finger, speaking in that flat, chilling voice of hers. I want to take part in the investigation. Victor reflexively refused. Impossible! The single word came out sharper and higher than he intended. Fear had tightened his voice, fear not for himself, but for Wednesday and Enid. The last time they had run into that plague doctor had been a nightmare. It hadn't been a fair fight. Even though they outnumbered him, they had almost been killed by one non-combat robot. Victor had burned nearly every trick he had just to get everyone away. The man in the mask had never even shown his full strength. If that was true, if a handful of crude grunt machines and one precise humanoid had forced them to the brink, what could a fully deployed plague doctor do? Victor's gaze slid again to the wings in the pieced-together photo, and a new chill crawled up his spine. Victor. Wednesday's black eyes held him without blinking. Her tone remained even, but the chill in it was unmistakable. You should know that people of one are not used to hearing the word no, especially when there's potential fun involved or danger. It was Addams' logic. Danger is an invitation. Then, Wednesday. Victor forced himself to meet her all-seeing stare. The usual flippancy and charm were gone from his voice. Only solemnity and iron resolve remained. You should also know that once I, Victor Black, say no, it is final. There is no room for negotiation. It was the first time he had ever refused Wednesday so flatly, with a firmness that bordered on confrontation. The cabin seemed to condense around the two of them. Silence fell like dust. Enid watched them with worry. She could feel the fear coiled under Victor's calm and the cold pressure radiating from Wednesday, the kind that filled a room when her authority was questioned. Agnes had to hold her breath, stunned to see the usually smiling, easygoing Victor stand so hard and unyielding. This 12, who always seemed all warmth and smiles, was daring to defy Senior Wednesday so directly. What had driven him to such a line? Wednesday said nothing. Her pale, delicate face showed no flicker of emotion, but those who knew her would have sworn the room had grown colder still. Her fingers, resting on her knees, curled the slightest degree. 194. Real-time competitive matches. A sudden clamor outside the cabin shattered the frozen silence inside. Victor seized the moment to divert everyone's attention. He smoothed his expression and tilted his head toward the door with practiced nonchalance. What's all that noise out there? Let's go see. He offered an escape from the awkwardness, eyes flicking toward Wednesday with a faint probe. Wednesday's bottomless black eyes glanced at him. She didn't call him out, only pursed her neatly lined lips in the smallest imperceptible sign of agreement. She stood first, her black skirt whispering against the rough wooden floor as she moved toward the door. Enid breathed a relieved sigh and hurried after her, tugging at Victor, who still looked a little dazed. Agnes fell at the rear, heart in a tumble. She'd been stung by Victor's earlier cold look and worried about what Wednesday would think. She walked with her head down, fingers nervously twisting together. As Agnes passed Victor, he paused and murmured, barely above a whisper, just for her. About before. I'm sorry. His voice held awkwardness, but it was an apology. Victor knew there was no point taking his annoyance out on a paranoid 13-year-old whose head was full only of protecting Wednesday. Agnes had only by accident exposed his thinly held secret. She looked up sharply, pale and stunned, eyes reddening like a startled rabbit. Seeing that softened him a little. He sighed and, almost on reflex, ruffled her flame-red hair with the same perfunctory, habitual motion he'd used before. Let's go. He dropped the two words and strode to catch up with Wednesday and Enid. Agnes stood for a moment, dazed from the lingering, not very gentle touch on her head and a rush of confusing feelings. He actually apologized and patted my head? She shook her head hard to quiet her messy thoughts and ran to catch up. When they reached the center of camp, they found their Nevermore sanctuary invaded by a group of uninvited guests with a completely different vibe. A team of training camp scouts, in uniform and brimming with energy, were unloading luggage like ants under the direction of a burly instructor. They looked ready to set up camp right there. Most of the Nevermore students stood with arms folded, watching coldly or whispering among themselves. The air thrummed with the insulted pride of the home team and the delicious anticipation of a show. What's the situation? Victor grabbed a passing werewolf classmate whose face announced bad news. Didn't we book the whole place today? Where did these brats come from? Victor demanded. The werewolf bared his teeth and gestured toward the camp office. The guy in charge got drunk and double-booked the dates. Now these guys say they reserved it first and refused to leave. Victor raised an eyebrow. A look of someone spotting entertainment, more specifically, a punching bag, flickered across his face. Stealing his turf? Stealing turf from Victor Black? They clearly hadn't asked who they were dealing with. He'd come out of that cabin full of fire with nowhere to vent. He couldn't lash out at Wednesday or Enid, and taking it out on little Agnes would be cruel. This was perfect. A bunch of living sandbags had dropped into his lap. If he didn't stretch his muscles now, he'd be failing at showing them proper hospitality. He rubbed his hands together, a malicious smirk curling his lips as his eyes scanned for a useful weapon. But before he could strike a pose, a dark silhouette cut through the chaos like a blade. Wednesday. She stepped forward and walked straight up to the scout instructor, who was barking orders with his hands on his hips. The man was thick with muscle. He froze when he saw a pale, thin girl in black before him and waved her off impatiently. Move along, kid. Can't you see the adults are busy? He stopped mid-sentence when she lifted her eyes, those black, bottomless eyes fixed on him with absolute calm. There was no threat, no fury, only a cold, penetrating scrutiny that sent a shiver down the instructor's spine. His remaining words died in his throat. This camp, Wednesday said, voice cold but not loud, oddly cutting through the noise around them, is for our use. The man blinked, cowed for a moment, then puffed up with embarrassment and anger. On what grounds? We booked it first. Don't you understand first come, first served? First come, first served? Wednesday tilted her head, a trace of irony on her face. At Nevermore, we prefer another way of settling disputes. Her expression stayed blank, but something like cold flame burned in her eyes. A match. Winner takes all. The loser, she said, pausing just long enough for effect, then finished with two clipped words, goes home. The verdict was crisp and final, like an executioner's blade. Victor, listening from behind, felt his eyes light up. Yes, simple, direct, efficient, and undeniably cool. The instructor looked stunned. He sized up Wednesday, then the oddly dressed Nevermore crowd behind her, anger and incredulity twisting his face. A match? Against you? Outcasts? He sneered. In what? Playing house? In what you're best at, Wednesday said flatly. Her tone dropped like ice in boiling oil, and the instructor's eyebrows shot up. Multiplayer combat, do you dare? Victor took the cue and stepped up beside Wednesday, his eyes flashing with the thrill of chaos, fully backing her. On cue, Venom, the dark creature attached to his shoulder, writhed and with a sickening slither disgorged a pile of heavy objects onto the ground. It wasn't one or two items, but nearly 100 firearms of various makes, gleaming cold in the sun. Behind them came several crates filled to the brim with gold and brass rounds. The wooden boxes hit the dirt with a dull thud, kicking up dust. A real-time combat match? You've got guts, little girl. It's a deal, the instructor said, startled at first, but then laughing. He picked up what looked like the most vicious assault rifle, weighing it in his hands. It felt substantial, heavy, well-made, the safety catch resisting his thumb in a way that seemed very real. He snorted. The props department must have spent a lot on set pieces. He tossed the gun back with a metallic clang, assuming they were high-end toys brought by cosplay-obsessed weirdos. Only the Nevermore students, especially those who'd done business with Victor before, had their mouths twitch. They'd learned that when Victor Black made a move, simulation seldom meant pretend. Of course, since it's a competition, there must be a prize, otherwise it's not fun. Victor's smile widened, almost seductive. Like a magician, he kept pulling things from Venom's shadowy form. A gold bar the size of a brick clanged down beside the firearms, gleaming temptingly. Then handfuls of perfectly cut rubies and sapphires tinkled and scattered, catching the sun. One after another, gold bars and gemstones piled up into an obscene mound, enough to make anyone lose their head. The rules are simple, Victor clapped, voice loud and designed to rile. This camp is the arena. You can go solo or team up. No restrictions. You heard right. No restrictive rules. The only condition for victory is to be the last person, or the last team, standing on this land. He spread his arms as if to embrace the battlefield. Winner takes all. Everything here, the gold, the gems, is yours. Those crude, irresistible terms, matched with the dazzling heap of real wealth, ignited the crowd. The scouts were trained, but they were adolescents. They'd never seen anything like this. Their eyes locked on the gold and jewels, breath quickening. With their training, they were confident they'd trounce these outcasts in a real combat scenario. Free money lay in plain sight. Fine, let's do it, the instructor barked, swept up by competition and the scent of easy spoils. He accepted the challenge with a wave of his hand, not even considering whether the weapons were real, already picturing how to split the prize. The Nevermore side flared with even more enthusiasm. Vampires bared their fangs, werewolf students howled, and other outcast kids rubbed their hands together. How could the small pranks of school life compare to a game with real guns and real treasure? The whole camp transformed into a battlefield on the brink of boiling over, the air thick with greed, excitement, and the faint, heavy tang of gunpowder. Vic was luxuriating in the chaotic carnival he'd set in motion when a cold hand settled on his shoulder. He turned and met Wednesday's bottomless black eyes. "Vic," she said, calm and steady, but carrying an unquestionable force, "raise the stakes." Vic blinked, taken aback for a beat. "Raise the stakes? Darling, our stakes are already plenty rich." "If I win," Wednesday interrupted, pressing her fingertips against his arm with a small, deliberate force, "let me take part in the investigation." It wasn't a request so much as an announcement. She'd made herself part of this mad gamble. The smile on Vic's face faltered as he stared at Wednesday's expressionless, resolute, pale face. There was helplessness in him, and an unnameable throb. He sighed, his voice threaded with complicated feeling. "Wednesday, sometimes your way, deciding on something and then throwing everything at it without worrying about the consequences, really makes me." Wednesday tipped one eyebrow. A faint, almost teasing spark flickered in her dark pupils. "Don't you like it?" Vic hesitated. Then the helplessness melted into a smile that was indulgent, admiring, and a little worshipful. The corners of his mouth lifted, his three glittered. "No," his voice dropped, unabashedly infatuated. "I actually love it to death." He leaned closer until he could almost feel the cool breath she exhaled. "Don't cry if you lose, my bet." "Count me in too." Enid's bright voice chimed in. She joined them, no longer dreamy-eyed, but carrying a rare, steady resolve like Wednesday's. "Ha-ha! Don't worry." Vic reflexively draped an arm around Enid's waist, casual as ever. "I'll carry you. I guarantee you'll win." Enid slid out of his hold like a fish, twisting free and planting herself at Wednesday's side. "Sorry, Vic." Her apologetic smile was firm and unyielding. "This time, I'm with Wednesday." Vic's arm froze midair. His smile collapsed into genuine dismay. He clawed at his already mussed black hair and let out something very near a wail. "Enid, why do you have to get involved in this mess too? It's dangerous. I'm not joking." Enid didn't budge. She met Vic's worried eyes with a voice as gentle as it was rock solid. "Vic, What Wednesday and I want isn't to stand behind you, watching you lead while we worry and do nothing." She looked pointedly at Wednesday, silent, allied, and continued, "What we want is to stand shoulder to shoulder with you and face whatever comes. Whatever it is." Vic looked at the two girls he treasured, one deep and steady as night, the other bright and unwavering as a clear day. Together they formed an alliance he couldn't refuse. Their eyes held no fear, no doubt, only the same insistence: we face it together. After a long breath, Vic let out a sound that was part defeat and part delighted bewilderment. A smile returned, resigned but warm and relieved. "Really? Did I save the world in a previous life? How did I get such wonderful girlfriends?" He softened for a moment, then his expression hardened with a protective stubbornness. "Moved as I am, I won't hold back." He looked at them both, steady. "Just as you don't want me to face danger alone, I want. Danger is something I should bear." For a heartbeat, the air seemed to still. A glimmer passed through Wednesday's dark eyes. Enid's blue pupils narrowed slightly. Then, almost at once, the three of them spoke, their tones overlapping with equal resolve. "Then, may the best person win." A wordless understanding fell over them. Competition and camaraderie braided together. For now, emotion and warmth were set aside. They were opponents stepping onto the battlefield, yet also the allies who knew each other best. Vic had proposed no rules, but to keep the contest from descending into total chaos, a few pragmatic students intervened and established basic frameworks. Rule 1. The poison circle shrinks. Specific areas of the camp and the surrounding forest were designated as the arena. To prevent contestants with invisibility or hiding tricks from stalling the game, a dynamic poison circle would gradually constrict the safe zone. Anyone outside it would be eliminated. This system, its generation and monitoring, would be built and maintained by Nevermore's tech prodigies, the Da Vinci Group. Rule 2. Ability restrictions. This was essentially aimed at Vic. Use of any 1311 or powers tied to the Ghost Shadow Legion was prohibited. The reasoning was simple: fairness. No one should be able to break the balance with blatantly overpowering abilities. Vic protested vehemently, calling it targeted discrimination, but Wednesday's cold stare and Enid's gentle persuasion ended his objections. Rule 3. Safety measures and lifeguards. Live munitions were involved. Therefore, Neutral Six were appointed to remove contestants quickly from the field when they were hit, incapacitated, or chose to forfeit, so they could receive prompt treatment. When selecting the six, Vic surprised everyone with a suggestion. "I recommend Thing as one of the six." He pointed to the severed hand that had crawled up onto his shoulder and was balancing on its fingertips. Thing. Wednesday frowned. Why him? She knew Thing's agility and loyalty, but in a chaotic setting, its efficiency didn't seem ideal. Vic only gave a sly smile and blinked. "You'll see soon enough. Trust me, he's one of the best candidates." There was a mischief and confidence in that smile, as if some prank was about to pay off. Everything was set. The rewards, gold and glittering gems, shone in the sunlight. Firearms and ammunition smelled cold and metallic. The 12 generator hummed low, marking the initial boundary of the safe zone. Nevermore's students rubbed their hands together, eyes bright with excitement, greed, and thrill-seeking. The scouts strutted with trained confidence and sneering contempt for the mock guns, eager to try them out. Vic, Wednesday, and Enid exchanged a look. Each picked up a weapon, and then they melted into the camp's cover and the edge of the dense forest. The game, crazy on the surface but charged with undercurrents, had officially begun. 196. A replica gun? A real gun. On the temporary observation deck, everyone who wasn't competing had their eyes glued to the holographic projection cast by several floating metal spheres that blanketed the arena. The terrain, personnel positions, even the simulated shrinking of Unit 14 were rendered in crisp detail. In this technologically advanced age, the genius of Nevermore Academy's outcasts, the Da Vinci cohort, was on full display. They invented this kind of high-tech entertainment as if it were nothing. All of them were watching intently. All of them, that is, except Principal Dot. His sharp gaze wasn't on the screens at all. It was magnetically drawn to a pile of gold and gems Vic had casually left on a nearby wooden crate. Greed made his eyes almost drip. Ahem. Dot cleared his throat as if to appear nonchalant, leaned toward a Nevermore student beside him, and lowered his voice. That Mr. Black, he's quite wealthy, isn't he? The student didn't bother to turn. Huh? Vic? Yeah. I heard he spent nearly $10 million on dresses for Senior Wednesday and Senior Yeenie at last semester's ball. Nearly $10 million. The number squeezed Principal Dot's heart so hard it felt crushed. He'd spent years running his little scam disguised as a community service club. How much had he actually managed to swindle? 10 million tossed away on a single ball? Dot's mind immediately started recalculating. He'd been planning to use his position to lure Wednesday's grandmother, the matriarch of the funeral industry, here, then use a siren's hypnotic ability to make her voluntarily donate her fortune. Maybe he could find an easier, younger mark instead. So, what business is Vic's family in? He managed, swallowing his excitement. The student shrugged. Not sure, but Vic runs side businesses in school. I think he pulled in a few million last semester. A few million? The Scouts instructor, who had also been watching the projection, pricked up at that. He leaned in and changed pitch. What kind of business makes that much money? The student casually pointed at the contestants in the hologram selecting weapons. Those weapons. These toy guns? The instructor frowned. These sell that well? That profitable? He looked baffled. Principal Dot shared the confusion. Toy models worth millions. The student regarded them like aliens and with faint pity dropped the bombshell. Who told you those were toy guns? Something in the instructor's and Dot's minds snapped. The instructor's face went taut, his pupils narrowed. He whipped his head back to the projection. On screen, contestant number 6 was deftly pressing a string of bright yellow rounds into a magazine with a crisp click. Contestant number 4 hefted a sniper rifle, squinted through the scope, and dialed the range. The posture, the weight, the motions, what had once looked like simulated realism suddenly became bone-deep reality. Real guns, real ammunition. That much of it, just piled there for a group of students to use in a competition. A cold, sick panic swept the instructor. The string of reason in his head snapped. Worse, an image stabbed into his thoughts with the force of an ice pick. Had he been sending his scouts here under the impression this was just a realistic game? They definitely didn't know. They were about to walk into a live-fire environment. Oh no, this is bad. The instructor's face drained of color. Cold sweat soaked his uniform. He shot up from his chair, ignored his recorded feed, and bellowed into the arena, voice cracking. Wait, stop! Pause the match immediately, you lunatics! We're done! We're pulling out! He scrambled to get down from the observation deck, desperate to yank back his students while they were still preparing. This was suicide. Relax, relax. A lazy voice answered from nearby. A Da Vinci student with messy hair and goggles was idly fiddling with a perfectly machined pistol, not even looking up. We already adjusted the rules when we discussed them. We turned down the power on these guns. At this level, they won't kill anyone. He finally looked up through his goggles at the panicked instructor, as if the whole racket were absurd. We're not idiots. Why would we actually gamble with lives? The instructor's frantic pace hit a brick wall. He let out a long, shaky sigh, wiped at his sweating forehead, and started to sit back down. I was scaring myself, he muttered. To prove the point, or out of pure habit, the Da Vinci student raised the pistol, aimed without looking, and fired at the sky. Bang! The sound was crisp. A shrill cry came from above. A high-circling bird, contestant number 10, erupted in a spray of red and fell like a stone. It landed squarely into the instructor's lap. Warm feathers and the metallic tang of blood hit him. He stared at the bird, a neat bullet hole in its chest, blood seeping onto his uniform. Then he looked up at the Da Vinci student, whose expression was pure, test complete. For a heartbeat, there was dead silence. The instructor's scream tore through the observation deck. He flung the bird's carcass away as if burned, leaped to his feet, and pointed a trembling finger. You said they wouldn't kill anyone. What is this? The Da Vinci student blinked, adjusted his goggles, and answered as if addressing a child. It's a bird. I said they wouldn't kill a person. I didn't say they wouldn't kill a bird. That's not the point. The instructor roared. Weren't the gun's powers reduced? How can they still shoot a bird out of the sky? The Da Vinci student looked thoroughly bewildered and a little offended. The rules state incapacitation counts as a loss. If the guns couldn't incapacitate, what would be the point? He sighed, as if duty-bound to explain to a baffled outsider. We calculated bullet mass and powder charge precisely. They'll penetrate skin and muscle to about 3 centimeters, maybe break 1 or 2 non-essential bones at most. They won't exit the body or cause fatal damage. Safety is guaranteed. The instructor stood there, mouth agape, staring at the proudly professional expression on the other's face, and then at the dead bird on the deck. Whatever small, comfortable world he believed in crumbled into dust. Guaranteed? He thought. Guaranteed my foot. These were lunatics who treated danger like a feature. He clutched his head and let out a long, helpless groan. I am not reassured at all. 197. Game start. The scouts realized something had gone horribly wrong the moment their shotgun blast sent a Nevermore student flying. They'd expected the usual simulated effects, the colored powder burst, the laser marking a hit on a simulated bullet. Instead, the tall, thin boy in the Nevermore uniform was hurled backward as if struck by a truck. He smacked into a withered tree with a sickening thud and slid to the ground, his chest a bloody ruin. Hey, weren't these supposed to be simulated? One scout blurted, voice shaking. He didn't finish. From the fallen boy came a horrible, teeth-grinding crackle. Limbs twisted and stretched unnaturally. Gray-black fur tore through fabric and spread like wildfire. His muzzle pushed forward. In seconds, he had become a 2-meter-tall werewolf, all bulging muscle and dripping blood. He shook his head, spitting wood chips and gore. Green eyes lit up as he fixed on the squad that had just fired. Thick saliva gleamed in his open maw. He was grinning, predator cold, thrilled by the hunt. Withdraw! Withdraw! The scout captain croaked, voice raw. He looked around desperately for a referee, for anything that would end the match. The rules were clear. You could only withdraw by being incapacitated or by leaving the 14. Worse, the strategic position they'd chosen was dead center in the first 11, and the werewolf had cast aside its firearm like a kid discarding a toy, very much intent on prolonging the game. Plenty of scouts fled like headless chickens, but the real advantages on this battlefield were obvious, the werewolves and 7. Werewolves needed no explaining. Naturally thick-skinned, and with the Da Vinci's friendly limits on firearms, bullets felt like ornaments. The werewolf chasing that squad had half-pound bullet heads embedded all over his chest and arms, glittering in the sun like macabre jewelry, yet he seemed merely annoyed, faster and more furious for it, howling as he closed in. As for 7, they were the undisputed kings of camping. Their talent didn't just affect them, it seeped into their weapons and even the bullets they fired. One moment, you were cautiously moving from cover to cover, and the next, a bullet with an impossible trajectory would call you out from nowhere. You died without ever knowing where the shot came from. Without extraordinary senses or special detection, facing them meant not knowing how you died. Vic was experiencing that camper's annoyance firsthand in another corner of the field. Using his reflexes and a bit of guile, he ducked into a thicket to deal with a vampire squad trying to pin him down. He was taking a breath when a faint disturbance in the air and a barely suppressed thrill of anticipation came from his back left. Tsk! Persistent brat, Vic muttered, already knowing who it was. Agnes DeMille. The red-haired girl treated this game as a chance to clear out the 7 and defend her senior. Invisible, she'd been clinging to him like a leech. He spun right. A completely invisible shot scraped the ground where he'd been standing, kicking up dirt. Vic rolled with the momentum and dove behind a thick oak, heart banging. Agnes was repositioning fast, hunting a new angle. Invisible threats were far more irritating than a werewolf face-to-face. I have to flush her out, Vic thought, narrowing his 6. Using 16 or 15 directly would break the rules, but the rules said nothing about props and the terrain. A wicked grin crawled across his face as he slipped a small 9 from his pocket with one hand and snapped up a handful of brightly colored with the other. Like playing hide-and-seek? Big Brother has a better game, he whispered. He hurled the 9 where he guessed she'd be. Bang! Thick, pungent-colored smoke rolled out, blotting the area. He scattered the cracked-et into the cloud like throwing confetti. The smoke blurred vision and the little, bouncing trace disturbances in the air. At the edge of the vapor, a blurry humanoid silhouette wavered, Agnes dodging the crackers. She was still transparent, but against the smoke she showed up faintly. Found you. Vic moved like a cheetah, a blur of motion. He didn't charge the silhouette head-on. He guessed her likely dodge and struck that spot. Agnes let out a sharp cry of surprise. She hadn't expected such an underhanded trick. Her gun went up instinctively, but Vic was already upon her. With a crisp one, he pinned the wrist that held the weapon. His other arm swept around her waist, using his weight and momentum to slam her down onto the soft, awkward grass. The gun clattered from her hand. "Let me go, you rogue, pervert!" she shrieked, struggling, cheeks flaming with anger and embarrassment. In close quarters, her invisibility meant nothing. She was exposed and under him. Vic smirked down at her, equal parts triumphant and mocking. "Little girl, playing stealth on your senior? You're still green. Now you're incapacitated. Be a good girl and get out of the game." "Watch it," she spat. She swung a sudden boot for his midsection. Vic dropped his waist hold in a heartbeat and with lightning reflexes snatched her ankle mid-kick. He felt the small bones and the warmth of her skin, and despite the ridiculous intimacy of it, he couldn't help but scold. "Do you have any idea this concerns the future happiness of my Wednesday and my Enid? If you break it, can you afford to pay for it?" Agnes clicked her tongue, indignation and disappointment written all over her face. She tried to yank her leg free, but Vic held firm. "Humph, scumbag, pervert, you deserve it, let go." She glowered, all righteous fury and stubbornness. Vic couldn't be bothered to waste more words on the 18 lowly. With a quick lift, he scooped up the struggling Agnes like a plucked chick. She was nearly weightless in his arms. Across the field, a slow, eerie purple light was crawling forward, the lethal edge of the 14. Vic glanced at it, and a wicked grin spread across his face. With a quick twist of his arm, Vic flipped the flailing Agnes over, forcing her to face away from him. "What are you trying to do? Victor Black! I'm warning you. Rawr!" The pose immediately sent Agnes's mind careening into all sorts of awful, shameful scenarios that belonged in adult films. Her pale little face went bright red, and she began to struggle again, voice trembling with panic. "Oh, my little Agnes." Vic deliberately drawled the words, voice full of wicked playfulness. He leaned close to her ear and whispered just loud enough for them both, his warm breath brushing her reddened earlobe. "I'm doing this purely to win. Definitely no personal grudge involved." Agnes's brain hadn't caught up yet. She was still trying to figure out what kind of trick he was up to when she felt a sudden, unmistakable smack on her bottom. A crisp sound and a burst of stinging pain. "Wah!" Agnes cried out and stumbled forward, her body pitching like a ball kicked hard. She tumbled straight out of the safe zone boundary and into the eerie purple circle that marked out. "Woo! Victor Black! Are you even human? This is clearly a personal grudge. Woo!" She clutched her smacked bottom, numb with shock, tears welling in her eyes, a mixture of shame, anger, pain, and indignation, as she wailed in a high, complaining cry. Vic stood where he was, exhaling a long, satisfied breath. The brat's arrogance had evaporated in an instant. Refreshing. He'd wanted to do that for a long time. After that, the fight moved faster than he'd expected. Even though he couldn't use 10 or 9, with Venom wrapped around him, Vic felt like he was playing on easy mode. The symbiote lent superhuman senses, terrifying strength, and wind-like speed, letting him cut through the chaotic battlefield like he wasn't even there. A vampire, trying to sneak up from the flank, caught Vic's backhand elbow and went flying, the ornate rapier clattering into the bushes. A werewolf-class classmate with a riot shield, convinced his defense was impenetrable, got kicked away, shield and all. He rolled, the shield dented by a clear, sunken footprint. "Ha! Refreshing! Brother, how long has it been since we fought side by side like this?" Venom laughed in Vic's mind, the black viscous mass flowing over his body, condensing into fierce teeth and bulging muscle lines. "Please," Venom scoffed. "Didn't you just face the crow swarm a few days ago?" "How can that be the same? The crow swarm was work. This is entertainment. Pure, violent, physically and mentally pleasing entertainment." Vic shot back, dodging a burst of fire from above with the smoothness of moving water. They were clearing out fodder and bickering their way toward the center of the next safe zone when something exceptionally fast struck from the flank, a gusting blur that tore through the air. It was faster than Vic's usual reaction speed, even with Venom's enhancement. His pupils pinched tight. Relying on instincts honed from countless fights and pranks, he slammed his body backward and to the side. Screech! A cedar as thick as a bowl seemed to be sliced by an invisible blade. The top half of its crown let out a sickening crack and slid to the ground. The cut was terrifyingly clean. Enid, Vic shouted, steadying himself. He couldn't see her at first, but a faint trace of that familiar, slightly sweet perfume lingered in the air, and he locked onto it instantly. Are you trying to murder your husband? Hey! A playful giggle drifted out as Enid stepped from behind a large tree. Her azure eyes curved with smug delight as she glanced up at the goshawk circling above. The same thing Vic had transformed earlier with the three, which for some reason now seemed to have healing properties. Anyway, with this little guy around, even if you're cut in two, it can stitch you back together. No need to be afraid. Vic opened his mouth to quip something about a poisonous wife and put his hands on his hips, but the words stuck. When his gaze fully landed on Enid, his jaw dropped. The sight stopped him cold. She wasn't in her usual human form, nor was she the full-on werewolf form seen during a full moon. She was somewhere in between, a beast girl. Silver-gray wolf ears stood alert atop her head, twitching cutely. A fluffy, large wolf tail wagged behind her. Her forearms were subtly furred, her fingertips tipped with cold, glinting claws, sharp but clearly restrained. More striking than any of that was how her body had shifted. The muscle lines and proportions had subtly changed, enhancing her curves into something remarkably alluring. Where things should protrude, they did. Where things should curve, they did so cheekily. Her waist looked thin enough to be held in one hand. She radiated a combustible mix of innocent sweetness and wild temptation. The scale of it, those curves, would make even Wednesday envious. Enid, this. Vic's tongue tied itself in his mouth. His eyes widened until they were round, fixed on those impossible curves. Enid flushed at his gaze. She reflexively used her slightly furred arms to cover her chest, wolf ears flattening in an embarrassed scold. Stop staring, you pervert. If you keep looking, I'll scratch you. She flashed the claws as proof. Awoo! Before Vic could recover from the shock of her appearance, Enid emitted a playful howl and became a silver-gray lightning bolt, claws leaving afterimages as she lunged for his face. She obviously held back. This was lovers, play more than a lethal strike, but combined with how dangerous she looked in that form, it felt both erotic and risky. Hey, are you for real? Vic cried, scrambling to block. Venom, clearly amused, didn't give him perfect defense. Instead, it formed an elastic buffer over his body, so Enid's claws left a few shallow white marks, just right. They didn't really hurt. They tickled like flirtation. The two of them, man and wolf girl, sparked and scuffled in the clearing so fast they left afterimages. Sometimes Vic used brute strength to pin her. Sometimes Enid's agility threw him into a scramble with playful, pinching attacks. Venom provided running commentary in his head. Wow, that waist-to-hip ratio, that explosive power. Brother, your girlfriend has evolved. I strongly suggest you consider the sustainability of interspecies romance. Shut up, Vic roared inward, awkwardly ducking a tail swipe. It dawned on him. If this ended like a normal game, the final boss probably wasn't some anonymous player. It was the cute, dangerous beast girl in front of him. And he had a feeling Wednesday was watching from some shadowed corner. He could almost feel that cold, appraising gaze already. A wolf girl in front and a witch behind. This final circle was going to be brutal. As Enid's attacks grew more practiced, Vic frantically turned over plans in his head. How to break through this sweet little predicament, or at least die looking good. 199. How to make your girlfriend lose her fighting spirit. The battle, or rather the frolic, in the forest clearing between Vic and Enid was heating up. After shifting into her wolf form, Enid moved with razor-sharp agility. Every pounce and swipe had a wild rhythm. Her silver-gray body darted through the trees like a moonlit elf, if one ignored the thin glint of cold light at the tips of her claws. Vic, with Venom cheerfully cooperating, wasn't so much fighting as performing an elaborate, intimate dance. With every parry or dodge, he timed it so Enid's claws would only graze the edge of his clothes. He let her fluffy tail accidentally brush his cheek, feeling the faint itch and the unique scent of a girl. Whoa, brother, that sidekick. Her core strength is insane. I strongly suggest you learn that power generation technique, Venom shouted inside Vic's head, acting like a live commentator and chief instigator. Shut up! One more word and I'll make you go vegetarian next time. Vic roared inwardly, but he couldn't help smiling. He slipped aside to avoid a fierce claw strike, and casual as could be, squeezed the tip of Enid's twitching wolf ear. Eek! Ears were a sensitive spot. Enid let out a soft cry and shivered. Her offense faltered, her cheeks flushing red as she scowled at him with flustered annoyance. You're cheating! All's fair in war, my little wolf girl, Vic said smugly. He took the moment to close in and try a grappling hold to pin her wrists. Enid reacted like lightning. She twisted her hips and slid free like a fish, using his forward momentum to wrap her long legs around his waist and flip his balance. Thud! Vic's back slammed into a thick tree trunk, sending a rustle of leaves down over them. Enid straddled his hips, hands planted on his shoulders, claws an inch from his throat. Her blue eyes sparkled with victory and an almost smug delight. Got you! Do you surrender? She was panting, the rise and fall of her chest pronounced from exertion and the awkward position. Venom inside Vic let out a silent scream. Awoo! This position! Brother, best combat footage of the year. Surrender quickly, then pin her down. Wait, you've already been pinned. Vic ignored the loud roommate. He looked at Enid. She was right in front of him, her blue eyes bright with excitement and a little shyness, lips slightly parted and damp with sweat, wolf ears twitching in triumph. A mix of impulse, affection, and mischief welled up in his chest. He didn't struggle. He relaxed, a glint of cunning flashing in his eyes. A wicked smile curved his lips. Surrender? Sure. His voice dropped to a low, magnetic rasp as he leaned in. He raised a hand as if to push her away, but instead brushed a sweat-stuck strand of hair from her cheek. Enid's heart fluttered at the sudden tenderness. The strength in her grip on his shoulders loosened just a fraction. Now, Vic's other hand shot up and hooked the back of her neck, pulling her down. He tilted his head and captured her slightly parted lips. Mmph! Enid's eyes went wide, her mind blanked. Aggression, triumph, smugness, gone in an instant. Vic's kiss, equal parts tenderness and gentle domination, melted her defenses. She felt drained of strength, hands weakening against his shoulders, fingers turning into a limp hold on his lapels. Her legs, which had been wrapped around his waist, slackened, and she pressed fully against him. Her wolf tail stiffened in confusion before slowly drooping, her ears flattened against her hair. Only the occasional, involuntary twitch betrayed the comfort and pleasure of the moment. The forest noises faded until all that remained were their quickened heartbeats and mingled breaths. When Enid finally ran out of breath and began to gently pound on his chest, Vic reluctantly released her. Forehead to forehead, breathing ragged, he wore a grin that begged to be punched. So? Does this count as losing the will to fight? My trophy. Enid's cheeks were crimson, her eyes glassy. She panted and could barely form a sentence, only managing a bashful glare. No anger now, only watery, coquettish light. Her regal wolf queen demeanor had dissolved into a dazed, defenseless little lamb. Vic looked down at his girlfriend-turned puddle of warm spring water and felt triumphant. Even Venom's insistent nudging, "Brother, strike while the iron is hot. Maybe try ground techniques next," sounded sweeter. The smug smile froze on Vic's face like a lake freezing instantaneously. A cold gaze wrapped around the back of his neck like an iron thread. Vic's body went still. He didn't have to turn to picture those bottomless black eyes, like tempered night, staring into him. The air pressure seemed to drop. The silence itself was heavy. Vic's throat bobbed dry, and the arms holding Enid went stiff. He turned his head. Less than 10 meters away, in the shadow of a withered tree, Wednesday Addams stood silently. She wore her signature black dress. Her pale face looked almost translucent, dappled by the trees. Her pitch-black eyes regarded him calmly, and Enid, who was flushed and hazy in his arms, clearly recovering from post-battle weakness. There was no anger in Wednesday's gaze, no accusation, not even surprise. It was the extreme calm that unhinged Vic more than any scolding could. He was caught red-handed beneath a tree. No, caught in the middle of a highly tactical operation. Wednesday, listen to my sophistry. No, explanation, he blurted, trying to force an innocent smile that probably read as caught in the act, but still honest. Venom, somewhere in his head, was still chattering. Vic hoped his smile would be convincing. 200. Clash Vic suddenly shuddered, as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over him. Enid was still resting softly against his chest, cheeks flushed and eyes misty, caught in the afterglow of that sudden kiss. But the hairs on the back of Vic's neck were standing on end. Something was wrong. Very wrong. With Wednesday's freakish competitiveness and need for control, especially with this bet about her legal participation in the investigation, she shouldn't just be standing back in the shadows like a sulking bystander while he and Enid settled the score. She would have joined in, claimed victory directly. Her silence didn't feel like calm. It felt like gathering strength, or a disguise. Before he could fully form the thought, his venom-enhanced hearing picked up an almost imperceptible whistle, nearly lost in the wind. It came in a heartbeat. Relying on instincts honed through countless pranks and near-death scrapes, Vic didn't have time to think. He just jerked his head to the right. Shh! A slender 5, rhymed with dark purple light and carrying a cold, murderous intent, whistled past his ear and buried itself in the rough trunk of a tree behind him. The blade sank with a dull thud. The hilt shivered from the residual force. A few strands of black hair floated down. Vic felt the cut of air as the blade had passed. His pupils tightened and his heart leapt. He turned slowly. Someone had appeared in front of him, Wednesday, but not the same one he'd seen seconds ago. This Wednesday wore a skin-tight symbiote armor that gleamed dark purple, outlining her figure with lethal edges. Her face was pale and unreadable. Her eyes were pitch black, burning with a cold, resolute fighting spirit. In her hand, she held the 5 that had nearly headshotted him. Tsk! She gave a faint, almost imperceptible scoff of regret. Lucky you, it said. With a nimble wrist, she drew the knife from the tree, flinging off a few chips of wood as if the lethal strike had been nothing more than a greeting. Instinct pushed Vic to look where the earlier Wednesday had stood. Where had that cold, fixed figure gone? The Wednesday, in the shadow by the dead tree, rippled and dissolved in a puff of dark purple smoke, merging into the air. Nightmare's illusion. Vic understood in an instant. The quietly watching Wednesday had been an illusion created by Nightmare to distract him and lower his guard. The real Wednesday had used that power to mask her movement and attack from the optimal position to deliver a killing blow. Her aim wasn't to catch them in the act. It was to eliminate her competitor and win the bet. If he hadn't sensed the inconsistency, he'd probably already be out of the game. Wednesday, you cheated! She stood with the sword, its purple light glinting in the gloom. A faint curve tugged the corner of her mouth, a small, chilling smile. All is fair in war, Vic. Her voice was cold and unembarrassed, almost appreciative that he'd reacted. Now, small talk is over. Before the words finished, she flicked her wrist and the 5 became a bolt of purple lightning that lunged at him. Direct, deadly, fast. Whoa, buddy, you've got to let me take over for this one. Venom's voice buzzed in Vic's head with a rare mix of urgency and glee. With your little girlfriend's current skills and Nightmare's boost, you might not win. Her sword is lightning fast and seeks vitals. This isn't flirting. Vic sidestepped nimbly, barely avoiding a throat thrust. The wind from the blade stung the skin of his neck. Venom, he hissed as he ducked under a horizontal sweep. Are you underestimating me? Get me a 5, same specs as hers, but tougher and lighter. Are you planning to? Black matter peeled from Venom's form and condensed into a streamlined, matte-finished 5 in Vic's hand. Confused but compliant, Venom asked the rest. Vic flicked his wrist, feeling the perfect balance of the weapon. A fierce fighting light lit his eyes. Beat her head on. Clang. Their fives met with a bright ring and sparks. Surprise flashed across Wednesday's dark eyes. She hadn't expected him to choose a sword, let alone to hold it with any real form. Vic's technique wasn't refined, roguelike, scrappy, but it had a strange, effective power to it. She humphed and adjusted. Like a viper's tongue, her sword split into several points of cold light, stabbing toward his upper body vitals with lightning speed. If it had been the old Vic, he might have retreated or clumsily blocked. Instead, his pupils pinched and he didn't step back. Venom's dynamic vision and neural reflex boost let him just barely track the blade. More importantly, feint at the left shoulder, real thrust at the right ribs. She tilts her wrist inward by 0.3 millimeters after the third feint. Images of Wednesday practicing flashed through his mind. After spending all this time with her, he'd learned more than he thought. Shh! Vic's sword swept up at a near-precise, slightly awkward but deadly accurate angle and barely deflected the true strike. Wednesday's brow creased minutely. Coincidence? The clash continued. Clang, clang, clang. The fight upended Wednesday's expectations. Vic clung to her like a stubborn piece of taffy, forcing close-quarters combat. His swordsmanship was messy. Slashes, hacks, blocks, thrusts, whole moves borrowed from street brawling. He would fake slips to bait her, kick up dust to blind her, do whatever felt natural. Yet, somehow his chaos countered her precision, neutralizing the most threatening attacks at critical moments as if by instinct. It wasn't luck. It was timing, finding a hairline gap in her power or striking when her old strength had ended and the new hadn't fully formed. The chill in her gaze deepened. She pressed harder, weaving a deadly net of blade light to test how long his luck would hold. Hey, hey! Left! She's going for your kidney! Your parrying stance is a mess! Venom shouted in Vic's head, nervous and exhilarated. Shut up! Keep my lower body stable. Why is Nightmare's boost even bigger than yours? Sweat dripped down Vic's temple. Enid, finally out of the kiss's daze, watched the two dark figures clash in a blur of steel. The blade clangs were relentless. She blinked between the merciless, sword-wielding Wednesday and Vic, breathless, refusing to give ground. Hesitant, she called out, Wednesday? Vic? Want to take a break? I brought water. Only the ringing of metal answered her. Vic gritted his teeth. Wednesday's speed, viciousness, and trickery still outclassed him. Even with Venom and his little cheat sheet, it felt like walking a blade's edge. The tip of her five nicked his skin several times, leaving shallow, bloody streaks. The Venom symbiote tore in places and healed, but the pain was real. He couldn't match her technique. He'd lose if he tried to fight on her terms. He had to use his strengths and avoid his weaknesses. He feigned weakness, deliberately losing balance and stumbling backward. Wednesday took the bait. Her sword arced like a swan and thrust straight for his open chest. This time, Vic didn't dodge. A flash of ruthlessness crossed his face as he met the sword with his left hand. Pfft! The five sliced through his palm and sank into flesh. Wednesday froze, momentarily surprised. She hadn't expected him to take the blade. Got you.